Good evening. Welcome to the Bothell City Council regular session for July 8th. If you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. We have a full council this evening, which is good to see. I've asked for a point of personal privilege from Mr. Bill Evans. Bill?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have been thinking, since we've had a week or two off, I've been thinking about our previous meetings in June, both June 3rd and June 17th, and I think there were frustrations or concerns expressed at both of those meetings, and I guess I just wanted to comment briefly on those. That, you know, the concern at the June 3rd meeting that there was some name calling and things said that were apparently not appropriate to some. I did go back and look at those minutes and things, and I didn't see any particular name calling. I did see how people may interpret things differently, but regardless of whether it was said or not said, I think, as I said earlier, we're all professionals up here, or certainly adults, and should be able to express our feelings in an appropriate manner that's not offensive to other council members. I think we need to continue to be aware of that, but again, I didn't see any personal name calling there, but I would hope as we move forward with this council, I think we're all here to do the job for the residents, and obviously that if there is any of that going on, that certainly isn't conducive to a good work atmosphere, and I would hope we would all, I think we all agree with that, and that we can move forward from that. So that was just one concern that was expressed, or thought that I had in my mind. I've been thinking about the June 3rd meeting, and then on the June 17th meeting, we had a member of the public get up and really attack a member of this council. Actually, it was Mayor Freed, I think, for his religion or beliefs or faith, whatever the case may be. And as council members and the public, that is our responsibility to listen to the comments of the public, and I know we all do that. And there's a lot of comments not a lot, but there are some comments occasionally that come across pretty strong and directed to maybe a person individually. In this case, it was the Mayor Freed, and I just think that it's our responsibility to listen to those comments. But I think as council members, we should not endorse or support or recognize some of those comments that are directed specifically to someone on the council in a derogatory manner. That's not what we're about as council members. And I know every person on this council personally, and I know that they're all good people, you know. And so I would hope that, again, the public has the right to say what they want to say, but I would hope as council members that we respect each other, and whatever the case may be, and treat ourselves that way, and I hope that's something we can carry forward on the council. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate your comments, Bill. My faith is definitely very important to me, and those who know me best and those who know me up here know that I am have many faults in life. So those often come out, and so I do want to have a good debate up here on the issues, and we can definitely disagree with them or agree on them, but personal items I will do my best as well to keep things above the belt and treat each other with respect in that regard. But when it comes to issues, I think we can debate those openly and honestly. So thank you. Moving on, we do have a meeting agenda tonight that we've before us. Does anybody have any changes, alterations to what we see? Councilmember Lane?
Mr. Bear, I just had a question in terms of our study session on the Fitzgerald sub-area. It's my understanding that there are folks here who would like to comment on that, and I don't know what your preference is as the chair. We don't typically take public comment during that session, but I wanted to know if you felt that was appropriate in this case, or if you wanted to ask them to speak during public comment at the beginning of the meeting. And I just wanted to put that to the chair, and I'm comfortable with whatever approach you decide to take.
Okay. I would love if the public would address the council during the visitor section, considering what potentially might be a late hour for that subject. It'd be nice to get your comments into the record if you're willing to do so. Is that agreeable? I don't see any nods or disagreement. Okay. If somebody new walks in and was expecting to speak at that time, maybe I can get some acknowledgement from Mr. Barry or something to that extent. So appreciate everybody's consideration in that manner. Councilmember Sandberg.
I wanted to add some additional minutes to Agenda Bill 14106, which was the 522 Stage 3 improvements. We've got it scheduled for 5. If we could add 10 more, that would be great.
Okay.
And then the next item, which is the public hearing to approve the 6-year TIP, we have slated for 15 minutes. If we could add an additional 20 to that. I have some potential projects that I would like to propose to council and have them have the opportunity to discuss those.
Yeah. I'm agreeable to both. Everybody else? Councilmember Evans?
Mayor, I was going to move that we move Agenda Bill 14104, which is the contract for Wiser Construction, and 14105, that's a consent to complete design on the safety improvements at 228th. I wasn't aware that there were questions, but I see there are some on the dais, so I don't know, maybe the council wants to keep those on the agenda, or are we willing to move those to consent?
Sure. Tris?
I'm fine moving them to consent. Staff has answered my questions, and I guess we're allowed to move those contracts, right, to consent? Okay, I'm fine with that.
Thank you.
I'm fine with that. Anybody else? That's 3.
Agree.
Okay. So let's move to consent. How about the request for 15 and 35 minutes? I'm fine with it. Anybody else? Yeah? Okay. Any further? Councilmember Rayam.
So this doesn't really have a place in the tonight's meeting agenda, but what I want to do is make a motion to rescind the decision made on June 3rd, 2014 to move forward with the construction of City Hall.
Second.
So that would be a reconsideration of a motion that's already passed. So
It's a motion to rescind, so it's different than a motion for reconsideration.
is that accurate, Joe?
There is a motion to rescind that is appropriate,
Okay.
but it's appropriate at the right time. I mean,
So we probably would need to schedule a conversation in that matter for later in the meeting.
probably would be the appropriate way to do it.
Okay. So could you make your request to just have a item at the end of the meeting in the agenda?
There's quite a few visitors that are here that would like to probably speak or hear the discussion on that, so at 10 o'clock at night wouldn't be ideal, maybe after consent. Just doesn't really fit into one of our categories for our meetings, so I don't know when would be the appropriate time to put it in here.
Yeah. Well,
Probably before we move into a study session, I would imagine.
I haven't counted up all the time that we have. I don't know that it would be 10 o'clock. Does anybody have the projected agenda that kind of lays out the whole schedule? 5, 10, 30.
So 7. It'd be like at 8. It's scheduled to end at 8:50. It looks
9
like.
o'clock or so. So why don't we just do it at the end, and we'd probably be around 9 o'clock. Is everybody agreeable to that?
I'm really not, but I'm just 1 of 7, so.
Do you want to move it? Well, I mean,
Well, the reality, I guess, here's the reality. Maybe there is no support to even put it on the agenda for reconsideration tonight. So that's one thing that has to be discussed. So the option is to take it up at 9 o'clock or potentially not at all or whatever it may be.
take it up at 9.
That's fine, we can take it up at 9.
Okay. So we have 2 people supporting to go up at 9. Councilmember Evans, any comments?
That's fine with me.
Okay. So 9 o'clock, reconsider.
Mayor, can I ask you a question, though? Is it scheduled then, would it be scheduled ahead of the Fitzgerald sub-area? Because there are
After.
people here before that also.
It's the last.
Okay, it'd be the last
on
item.
agenda. I just guessing 9 o'clock, but it will be reconsidered after the study session,
Okay.
109.
Thank you.
Any further items on the agenda for tonight? Seeing none. Well, projected agenda, everybody should have a copy in their pamphlet this evening. I don't have any comments or changes. Deputy Mayor Spivey?
Great, thank you, Mayor. Next week, I will be absent. I have the only time I could get scheduled within reason for some oral surgery. So unless I showed up on some pain meds, which you probably don't want,
don't
I
know.
won't be here. And then on September 2nd, I would like to have a discussion and possibly a vote to look at signing 180th going from 522 up to Bothell High School as Cougar Way. Practice done in many communities with their local high schools, and I'd like to have that alternative sign going up there, and then also at the top of the hill by the high school if possible.
So a study session item.
I don't know. Do we think staff could bring something back and to take action on that day?
We could be prepared for action if council chose to do so, yes.
I think that'd be great.
Councilmember Sandberg.
Well, every year, right around July 4th, I get a lot of comments. I get some emails from members of the public. I've seen letters to the editor and the Bothell Reporter. There was a editorial written in the Bothell Reporter this last issue about how to handle fireworks in Bothell. And so I was wondering if we could schedule sometime in the future, in the third or fourth quarter, a discussion of our current fireworks code.
Is anybody interested in having that discussion?
I am.
Bill is, Tris, anybody else? 4.
And, you know, the editorial in the Bothell Reporter posed the question of thinking outside the box as opposed to just an outright ban, thinking of creative solutions where we can make as many sides of the public happy or as happy as we can. And so my thought is not to have a conversation with a preconceived notion, but to review what we have, look at options, and see what kind of options we can come up with, so that many more members of our community feel happy with the situation.
Interesting. I also received concerns from citizens. It turned out they weren't citizens of Bothell, though. Many came from outside, so from King County and also Snohomish County. I looked up addresses and such, and they were outside of the city. So I can encourage them to contact county councils and have those discussions. So it could be that we find that Bothell is operating just fine, and the counties need to address some outlying issues.
Mr. Mayor, if I could make a suggestion on this issue, if we could ask the Public Safety Committee to take a look at this, I think that would be appropriate, because they could have an interface with the fire department and then make kind of have a discussion and make a recommendation back to the council before we have a full council meeting on it.
Who's on that? I imagine our 2
I am.
firefighters and, is it Bill?
I
Or
am.
Is it Bill, are you on?
I am.
So I'm certainly supportive of going to the Public Safety Commission.
And then I think we can have we can see what other potential options there are and bring them back, make a recommendation to council or have something brought back.
So that'd be 3 in support of going to the Public Safety Committee. Is there a 4th or no? Or retain at council? Councilmember Evans.
I think that's a great place to start, but hopefully that discussion will eventually come back to council, because I received all of the emails, the same things as you, both pro and con. So
It would
I don't-
definitely come. But the thought is that it would definitely come back to council, but it would allow the committee
Yeah.
to speak directly with fire and police and have a conversation and then come back and make a recommendation.
And I think that's great, but I think since I've been on this council, I don't think we've really discussed it that I'm aware of in detail or gone back through the, so it'd be interesting for me just to see the background, and I know there's pros and cons both ways, too.
I think it's a good conversation. I mean, I think as Councilmember Sandberg indicated, that in the past, I think the question has always been posed in terms of a stark ban, and there has not been support on council to ban fireworks. And so if the conversation is look at alternatives to an outright ban, then I think there may be support.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Good news is patriotism is alive in Bothell. Any other further comments on the projected agenda? Any council committee reports? Councilmember Evans considering.
Just briefly, the RFA is moving forward with our committee discussions. Councilmember Agnew, myself, and Councilmember Spivey on that. And there's 3 committees that will be represented on each of the 3 committees from each of the jurisdictions. So we'll be getting into the details of finances and level of service and the other one. So those committee meetings will be starting probably this summer. We'll have them scheduled, and we'll be reporting back to the council on that as it goes. But that is moving forward with some detailed discussions on the RFA right now. So just inform.
Great. Anyone else? Andy, you sometimes have some? No? Okay. Great. Next is our visitor section, and I do have several sign-up sheets here. On the sign-up sheet, as always, it says that we limit our comments to 3 minutes. We do have the podium, and we always want to make sure that the light is turned on. So oh, there we go. Ann has one for me as well. We'll grab that from you and enter it into the record. So we have 30 minutes for this. We only have 6 at this point, but I'll open up to the rest of the visitors here who may have further comments. There are items that are scheduled for the agenda tonight. I do encourage the Fitzgerald neighbors to come up and speak during this time, and there may be an opportunity to speak later, but I just entering on the record right now and make sure that everybody's here and present before we may lose people later in the meeting would be my preference. So first on the list I have, I believe, Michelle Lebrasseur, and forgive me for my pronunciation. We can do that on the projector just to your left. And is the light on the... Thank you, Joe.
Done with that.
Is there
Not
something
gonna
that
mess
we
with
can
it.
help
no,
you with?
No, that's okay. They're pictures of the slough.
Oh, okay.
So my name's Michelle Lebrasseur. I live at 16507 Balder Lane. It's a Valhalla subdivision. I am here to speak about the ecology of the slough and boating safety, which are both together connected. Who do I represent? Well, we're that big, long ranch house right next to the Valhalla pool, and there's Tom next door to me, and there's 3 or 4 other houses. That's all I'm going to speak about because that's what I see every day. That's what I look at. My office looks out onto the slough. What is our issue? I've lived in this, in Valhalla, in that house since December 21st, 1999. I will tell you, in the last 3 years, I have seen complete and utter lawlessness with boaters. Drinking, driving, racing, pulling skiers, cigarette boats racing one another, three side-by-side jet skiers racing. And at the same time, we have, and Steve will be up here after, we also have this wonderful business that are renting paddle boards and kayaks to families. So we have this collision, and 2 weeks ago, I thought I was going to see 4 kids killed. There were 2 cigarette boats racing and dragging. You try to go out there, wave them down, right? And they just keep right on going, and they'll zip around sometimes and come back and flip you the bird, and that's what I get. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And I know there is a tradition of racing there, and it seems as though there is some kind of green light in these guys and their guys' heads when they hit the Waynita Bridge and they want to go around that bridge on the 8th hole on Wayne Golf Course. They want to rocket right around the corner, and they can't see all the families that are kayaking and boating and paddleboarding. And I can't paddleboard, but I would be in trouble if any of these boats came past me. And if you go like that, they argue with you. They say, well, it's a no-wake zone. But if you're on a paddleboard, there's a big difference in how much you can handle and absorb. So 2 weeks ago, I almost saw some kids get killed. So that was it. I started raising hell and sending emails to everybody. And I know a lot of you are on vacation, but I copied a whole lot of you on what I found and all of that. But what I want to tell you is that I got immediate responses from Chief Cummings. Bob Wolverton's coming over to meet with me tomorrow and observe from my deck. Hopefully we'll see some of those people while he's there. I've interacted with Steve Holmes, who has the rental service. Dell and Andy got back to me, and Tom got back to me right away saying, yes, it's something. Who I haven't heard from is the mayor of Kenmore, but again, people are on vacation now, I understand that. What's that?
That means your 3 minutes is up, so if you could take 10 more seconds.
All right.
It's so
So
much
what I
fun to
want
be
you
here,
to
I
do
know.
is do something about it, because I think there is an ecological issue, and I think you need to wrap in the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. They haven't gotten back to me. I think you need to deal with it. I think there is a precedent that has been established in Bothell back when they used to race those mini, whatever, hydroplanes.
Yep.
And there are certain people that can't give that up.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your comments this evening. I also received your email. Councilmember Sandberg has a comment. I also saw, I think, City Manager, you responded as well? Yeah, okay.
Chief Cummins
Chief,
responded.
okay,
Chief
that's
Cummings
right.
responded
Sorry.
right away.
Councilmember Sandberg?
I think in one of your emails you asked about how to get signage, a no wake signage placed. Has there been any progress on if we can get a speed limit or no wake signage placed in locations, at least within Bothell? Whose jurisdiction is that, and how does that happen?
When we received information about this, Captain Wolverton went out to look at the signage along the slough. There actually is signage in a number of locations. He said some of it could be spruced up a little bit, and I talked to that would be the Public Works area to look into that, but there is signage there. It's a matter of whether or not people are enforcing it.
Okay, thank you. Next on the sign-up sheet of Mr. Steve Holmes, we have your address. Mr. Holmes, if you'd like to come up, nice to see you.
Nice to see you guys. Yeah, Steve Holmes, resident, and have a business here, a couple of businesses. I want to thank Michelle for her caring about our boaters and our kayakers and our stand-up paddlers and everything else. So we have an operation in Bothell and we have an operation in Kenmore. Give you a little bit of history about me. I've been in water sports maritime industry since 1975. It's not a new subject to me. Generally when people are not active on the water and they're viewing it from the land, it's a little spooky, for them. So I've been operating boat charters, surf shops, surf rentals, boat rentals. Currently, the captain of one of the captains of the steamship Virginia 5, which is Washington State's boat, National Historical Site. So I understand, it's a steamboat. So I work with the chief engineer, and I got kayakers cutting me off and paddle boards cutting me off. So it's a little bit different. So I could see what she's talking about. But I think that Washington State, I think, is still the highest boating capital of the United States, next to Florida. And we've got a lot of waterways, a lot of boats, and incidences like this are definitely going to happen. Police are out there, sheriffs are out there looking for BUIs, drinking underneath the influence while boating. You're going to have people that are not going to obey the law, speed up, and go fast. I've seen it a few times on the river. We run hundreds of people through Bothell Landing. I've never had one complaint yet, and people that were scared. We always instruct people to stay like a traffic lane, stay on the right, stay close to shore, don't go out in the middle, just on a blind curve. So I think if we update, maybe put some buoys out there. There is a couple signs out there, somewhere on private property. There's one on a bridge that you can't read. It's pretty much moss covered. So I think if we do that, and I think we'll be fine. It's a common problem through the Sound. It's hard to catch people speeding on a waterway like a freeway. It's this whole different animal. we don't have law enforcement, every quarter mile, They may be way over there in Kirkland, and the time they get over here, they're gone. So, it is tough. I think signage would be good, a couple extra buoys. I'm willing to donate into that. That's about all I got to say about it.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Next on the agenda, next on the sign-up sheet, I have Jan Shaw. Ms. Shaw, if you want to come forward. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thanks for having me. I'm Jan Shaw. I live at 13530 Cascadian Way in Everett. I recently put on the event of a boat race, what you call a boat race, what we call an exhibition, at Kenmore, to open the new ramp and to show how viable the river was and how many different activities we could do. Sail Outboard is a family-based organization that we teach people safe boating, to follow the rules, to follow the signage, give people something to enjoy, bring out people for tourism to both. And the city, actually Kenmore, benefited quite a well because we had a lot of people come out and watch what we were doing. With the new launch ramp open, it's been closed for so long, I think people got a little overzealous with some of their other things, thinking it gave free rein. We don't advocate that at all. We advocate safety at all points. Any questions?
No, I remember the mayor of Kenmore was very excited about the race.
We took
that you
him,
put on.
he went for a ride.
I bet that would be fun
along
to
with
see
the
in my
King
video.
County Councilman, Rod Dombrowski.
Yep.
And they are going down in our Eatonville location and learning how to pilot their own boat instead of just taking a ride. But it comes with learning safety and on the water.
That's right up Baker's Line. So nice to meet you. Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for your comments this evening. Next on the agenda, Bill Moritz. I do have your address and phone number already for the record. Bill, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I want to speak tonight about City Hall, but before I do that, I want to go on the record as being opposed to the so-called Parks and Public Spaces levy. Later, I plan to show you a plan or describe how we could have had a new City Hall right now for free. In fact, we could be making over $2 million a year, but I'll get to that in a minute. I requested a copy of the ordinance that you passed, and this is it, all 203 pages of it, on June 3rd. But the key document that was not available to the public before the meeting, not available to you until you sat at your desks up there, was this document put out by Mr. Engel from Public-Private Development Solutions. This is the key document that supports this whole thing. And it's where we learn he tries to justify the rental that we're going to be paying. But just today at 4 o'clock, we finally got the contracts that the city manager executed with Mr. Engel. I was racing through them trying to understand. This man looks like he's a key guy. He's a key person in this whole process. He's supposed to, among other things, be briefing the council. Has he ever been here to brief the council? He was not at the June 3rd meeting. That's very significant, I think. He was not in a position to defend this. This should have been in your hands and in the public's hands no later than the Friday before the meeting, and it's outrageous that it wasn't. The city manager's responsibility is to get you people information you need to do your job. Okay, I found out today that we've got a contract with Mr. Engel. He's gotten over $3,500 a month as a retainer. Not clear what he's doing for that. And if we paid $3,500 for this, we got ripped off. 10 years ago, Redmond, well, let me say one other thing. That this 6320 process, it allows the council to indebt the city for a lot of money over a long period of time without a vote of the people. But the RCW attempts to protect the people by requiring that you do a study on the comparable rates. Now, Redmond did this a few years ago, and they produced a study, 41 pages long, that came up with a totally different rental structure. But I'd like to ask a question here. When I looked at the ordinance, this is the signature page for the ordinance. Can someone tell me who the bond council's signature is down there? I'll tell you who it's not. It's Hugh Spitzer. There's his signature from the park bond issue. So who is protecting us now? The other thing is, I don't want to miss my chance to do the free City Hall thing. But if we had rented, if we'd have bought that building out on 195th for $26 million, we could have rented out half
Take
of it.
10 seconds to wrap up your comments.
Fine. We could have rented out half of it. We would have gotten back more, $2 million more per year than the rent. We could have saved all that REIT money that we're going to spend on spend on the new city hall, okay, using Mr. Engel's, what he claims to be the current rental rate.
All right. Thank you.
We got ripped off.
Next on the visitor's sheet is Mr.
I have a
Judd.
question.
You have a question? What is your question?
I have a question. Whose signature is that?
I'd have to confirm, but I suspect it's from someone from the same firm as Mr. Hugh Spitzer, probably Alice Ostek, I believe her name is.
And why wouldn't Hugh Spitzer sign the document?
Well, they're a law firm, and many of their lawyers sign documents approved as the form for us, rather than just simply being one particular person.
But this is a pretty important document.
It doesn't.
I would
does it
figure that
mean-
he would sign it.
Well, I think I don't see that has any bearing upon the accuracy and the diligence that the firm has performed on our behalf.
Allison's last name is Schwartzman. I don't see Schwartzman on that.
Are you completed with your question,
Well,
Councilmember Sandberg?
and then there's the question about the cost, the $3,500. Are we paying Mr. Engel a monthly retainer?
Mr. Engel's his firm has been paid for the last, when this activity was ongoing in 2011, 2012, through the solicitation process. The second half of that contract is for the construction management, basically our owner's representative, which is performed by Jim Napolitano of that company. And so that's the current retainer that we'll be paying as we move forward.
Well, I guess I would like to know, moving forward, exactly what it is that we're paying and how much and what we're paying for, because I believe we got another email from Mr. Moritz asking about the validity of this company, like where is it registered, and so if we're going to be doing business with this company or this person over a long term, I'd like to know a little bit more about it.
Sure. I'll provide the agenda bill, which I believe you're on council, that approved, that initially hired his company to perform the solicitation process, as well as all the work that had been effectively completed prior to resuming the City Hall discussions late last year. Again, our new retainer amount is for the amount of work that we had suspended because we weren't doing any more work on the City Hall, and that's simply for our owner's representative as the project moves forward under construction.
So this is a construction management?
The second part of it, it was again, I don't have the contract in front of me, but the way it was structured is the first part was for the solicitation and to assist with the 6320 process. The second part was for serving as the city's owner's rep to ensure that we're achieving the savings that we're anticipating and that the project is going as scheduled.
Mr. Mayor, I actually had a question for the speaker rather than the city manager, if I could have the floor.
Take the rest of your questions at the item that Andy brought up. Yeah. Mr. Moritz? You have a question from one of the council members, if you wouldn't mind coming back up to the dais, or not the dais, but the podium. Councilmember Lamb?
So, Mr. Moritz, you had sent us a letter last week and then copied us on a letter yesterday in which you asserted that the bond issuance was in violation of state law. And when I got your email, I replied immediately and said, could you tell me who you had spoken to who was a bond counsel or an attorney or had a background in municipal finance prior to making that statement? And I said, in the event that you hadn't done that, did you have any recommendations as to somebody that we could talk to as a city? And I didn't receive a response to that email, so I just wanted to give you an opportunity. I noticed in your remarks tonight you didn't say that the bond issuance was illegal, and I don't know if you have reconsidered your opinion or if you wanted to provide us with a bond attorney that you think we should speak with that's contrary to the opinion of Mr. Spitzer.
My issue is not with the bond issuance. It's with compliance with that law. Prevailing rates shall not exceed, the rental shall not exceed prevailing rates for comparable space. This city did no study of that. Redmond did a study.
So-
Their number was $25. Ours is $66.
So, Mr. Moritz, my question though was, did you have an attorney, did you speak to an attorney, or did you have one you think we should speak to? Because Mr. Spitzer opined on the exact issue that you're raising now, and his conclusion was the opposite of yours. And I don't know if there's somebody else, because it's a very serious matter, if, as you asserted in your letter, the issuance and the financial transaction is against state law, that's a very serious matter, and I wanted to know if there was somebody you had spoken to who supported that position, or that we could speak to as a council that would help us understand that legal argument better.
Well, I reviewed carefully the meeting of June 3rd. I did not hear Mr. Spitzer issue one word about this memo that came from the city's consultant that set that rate. In fact, there was virtually no discussion other than Mr. Evans holding it up and saying something to the effect that I appreciate getting this.
Well, I guess I have the answer to my question then. Thank you.
And I have actually referred this to the state auditor and the state attorney general, because I believe there's been a flagrant violation of that section of the law.
And our attorney, who has represented the state, disagrees with you. So are there any further questions or comments? Next item, Judson Clendaniel. Mr. Clendaniel, forgive me again for murdering your name, but we have your address for the record.
You did very well. May I borrow that? So, my name is Judd Clendaniel. I am a 30-year resident of the city of Bothell, lifetime resident of the city of Seattle, and a real estate appraiser. I've spent 36 years appraising commercial properties, including office buildings, industrial buildings. I helped write some of the Institute's textbooks, and in the last 2 weeks I ran into some information on the web that suggested you were going to spend $1,000 per square foot building a city hall. That struck me as not only overboard and not just expensive, but in multiple terms way more expensive than it should be, than it could be. There are no other buildings that cost that much. The rental rate that you talked about, $66.50 per square foot, and I will stand here and assert to you that I am an expert in the subject, does not meet that definition. It's not even close. You could rent space in Columbia Center for a third of that cost. It isn't even close. Now, I don't know what's going on. I assumed that the City Hall was something out into the future and had many months to go. I didn't realize it's fait accompli. It's already done. But please, as council members having a fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers, this is not even close. It's way, way above board. You're about to spend twice to 3 times the amount of money you need to build a brand new, very expensive, shiny office building. We've never met before, by the way, or talked. So, questions? By the way, if you're not sure about that, you could hire somebody to do a rent study or appraise the building for $4,000 or $5,000, which seems to me to be a pittance compared to $53 million that you're about to spend. Please take another look. Get some outside consult. Get some help on this. This is a mistake of monumental proportions. So if you don't want the 60 Minutes reporter knocking on your door a year from now, please look into this. I can't read the faces here. This can't be a shock. This can't be.
I have a question.
Thank you, sir.
I had a question,
Questions?
Judd, and I've known you for many, many years, and I've hired you to do appraisals before.
By the way, I served on the Shrines Board for many years, and finally see Ann Agard again, and worked for many of you, including our current city manager.
So, Judd, the question I have in terms of the rental rate of comparison is, you're not comparing a rental rate for an office that you don't own at the end with a lease rate for one that you do own at the end, right?
The details on that were sketchy, so I can't tell you. I
can tell. I can tell you.
I can tell you to the gnat's rear end, but this smells like a 30-year mortgage to me, and $66.50 is way. You could go to downtown Seattle and pay half of that for a new building.
So, just to be clear, the comparison rate is not one of renting an existing structure versus constructing a new structure that you own at the end. So because I've heard that analogy made several times of people saying, well, wait a minute, you could go and you could rent an existing commercial office building, as opposed to one that you are building that you buy at the end.
No, not true. $66.50 at what, a bond rate of 6-7% is over $1,000 per square foot, and you're not paying. You already own the land.
Well, I look forward to talking with you at the break or after the meeting and continuing the conversation, because I'd like to have an opportunity to talk with you further.
This could easily be proved. I mean, it's so far out in left field. It's not hard. It just isn't.
I look forward to continuing the conversation with you, Chad.
Please be careful.
Councilmember Rayum has a question for you.
The comparable analysis you recommended, could you repeat the title of those types of analysis that you would recommend we perform?
You could ask for an appraisal on the building as if it were completed, and in that appraisal you would have a comprehensive rent analysis that would include a market rental rate. You could have the buildings, whatever you're going to build, and I don't know the details. Maybe it's bulletproof and maybe it's gold lined. I don't know. But the rental rate that you're talking about and the costs that you're talking about are so far above market reality, even in the expensive market of Seattle. It's way overboard. It's not even close.
And then I have just one other quick question. Is in the commercial real estate industry, is there a thing called the build-to-suit?
Absolutely.
Own the building after.
I've done dozens and hundreds and dozens of them. Yes.
You would own the building after that as well, and those are typically at the
No. You wouldn't necessarily own the building. It could be structured in any way. It's a financing vehicle, and oftentimes in my industrial work, they will do a build-to-suit for some odd manufacturing firm. Nobody would take a chance building that and renting it out to begin with, so they write a long-term lease. And at the end of 30 years, it's probably worn out anyway. The closest thing that I can think of is Walgreens. Retail stores do the same thing. Sign a 30-year lease with options at a flat rate.
So, City Manager?
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this many occasions, but I think it is important to recognize when you hear people talk about, a triple net lease of $25 a square foot, you cannot compare that to the financing structure that we're building a new facility. The 6320 lease is simply called a lease because that's the financial model that we're utilizing. It's nothing more than taking the same debt service that we would issue on our own behalf, rather than having the National Development Council issue a debt on our behalf at maybe 25 to 30 basis points higher than we could achieve. It's the same method of calculation. We own the building at the end of the debt term. This is a $46.7 million building. Let's not mistake that. The $53 million is some $5 to $5.5 million of capitalized interest during the construction period, which likely we're going to get back, or much of that we'll get back, that will help defer some of our first years of payment. We've looked at the cost of this facility many different ways to try to reduce our expenses. We've compared it against other buildings that have been constructed recently by other local governments. $46.7 million is the total cost. It includes engineering, design, permits, mitigation payments to the city. That's everything from A to Z. The shell and core cost, if you want to start breaking the expenses down, which we have done, and then compared them against other facilities that have been built recently, it's under $26 million. In November of 2013, we compared our facility cost, once you strip away the site development cost, the permitting cost, the mitigation expenses, and the parking cost. We're right in the middle range of what others have been building their facilities for on a cost per square foot basis. That combined with the due diligence that we have done to make sure that we are receiving the very best cost at the lowest amount, and also receiving a building that's not scheduled to last 25 years. It's not going to be torn down. This is a building that we're anticipating occupying for the next 75 years. That's the quality of materials that we're putting forward in this construction project. So again, you can't compare a rental amount to a ownership debt financing lease structure that we're performing under the 6320.
All right, thank you. Deputy Mayor? Sure, okay. Councilmember Sandberg.
Well, I'm not an expert in commercial development. I would love to hear your response to that, because I hear things like, it's not 53 million, it's really just the 46.7, because that $5 million, we're capitalizing the interest.
I want you to think about something.
That-
47 million divided by 51,300 square feet. Ladies and gentlemen, that's $911 per square foot. Think about it. And what Bob just described was a 30-year mortgage with no equity in it. It's simple. It's not very difficult to calculate. I'm not sure. Maybe there are financing reasons to jump into that, and maybe that's good for the city and so forth. But the cost. Now, you mentioned mitigation. If there's toxics or something unusual under that building that needs to be dealt with, then maybe that will drive the costs up. But then I would suggest that you could go down the street and buy dirt and save several millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm. And for me, there's two issues here. One is, are we violating RCW? Have we done the work to show that the rental shall not exceed prevailing rates?
I speak as an appraiser, not an attorney. I'm telling you, you can't do that. You cannot do that. Bob mentioned comparables and competition and so forth. I'm prepared to prove what I said. I doubt very much if you can prove $1,000 per square foot cost.
And so that's the next point is, even if it isn't illegal, even if it somehow meets the intent of RCW, which several reasonable people look at and say it doesn't, it still doesn't meet it exceeds the outrageousness test of whether you want to call it $911 per square foot of construction cost or over $100 per construction cost, because that's not what prevailing office space is going for on cost per construction, cost per square foot. Do you have an idea of what the construction cost? We can leave the lease payment, the $66 per square foot. What's average construction
What would it cost to build an office building? Somewhere between $120 and $350 a square foot.
And we're talking
$1,000 a square foot.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
It's not even close.
Well, you have to take into consideration the whole picture. You're complaining about $1,000 a square foot. So if you're going to build a single-family home, that single-family home maybe costs $100 a square foot from the foundation up. You have to include the cost of the foundation. You have to include the cost of the architectural fees, the mitigation fees, and many other things. So I think we can't just do that direct saying that it's $100,000 in vertical cost.
You know what? You have some experience with that, I understand. But if you take that same example and take a standard bathroom of 8 feet by 12 feet, at this cost, you're talking about $100,000 to build a bathroom. It's not even close.
So I think we're speaking two different languages.
So Jed, can I ask you a question? And I appreciate this. In your business, you use comparables, right? What's the most recent building that was built in the city of Bothell by a government agency?
Oh, you don't think 36 years of experience and we could make adjustments for that? What are you doing to make it's an office building?
No.
And yes, you may have a city council.
No, I'm not talking about the city council. I'm talking about the new building on the University of Washington campus. I'm talking about the new building. Do you know what that was per square foot?
I did appraise that campus, but
do you know what it was per square foot?
So many years ago.
No, I'm talking about the one that was just built.
I didn't do the new building.
Okay, well, why don't you take a look at the per square foot price, and we'll talk later, because I'd be interested in getting your take after you have a chance to review that.
As a citizen of Bothell, I'm asking you to be careful. This
I
sounds
appreciate,
so
and
out-
I take
so
your
out
words to
left
heart.
field.
Thank you.
I think we're going to have further discussion on this later tonight.
And I think
so-
in light of what Councilmember Evans said at the beginning of this meeting, I think we need to be very careful about appearing to attack speakers who are bringing up valid points.
Judd,
Oh, no,
do you feel?
not taken, no. no.
Okay.
Thank you, Judd.
We're-
We're friends. Thanks, Tris.
Actually, like Mr. Clendaniel, he's a good man.
Can I, real quick, though? I was trying to interject. The University of Washington building has 11 laboratories in it. It is a building that was built to provide scientific classroom space. And actually, the cost per square foot is less than ours.
Okay.
It's less than $1,000 a square foot. I already did that.
Over
Let's let
900 a square.
visitors continue to speak. I believe the next sign-up would be sign-up number 6, and it was Ann Agar who raised her hand. I don't have your sign-up sheet, but when you come up, maybe you can just leave it with the clerk, and we can have it for the record.
It's been a while.
Here's this, and I'm going to give you this. Okay. I'm not going to talk about City Hall,
It's great to see you, Ann.
but it's great to see old friends. The first thing is I just handed to your city clerk my application for the Committee on the Parks and Public Spaces levy. I also put it in the mail, but forgot that that the pickup for the mail has changed to 5 o'clock instead of 6 o'clock down at the post office. So I wanted to make sure it got in. So it is now in the hands of the city clerk, and I have applied for serving on the committee.
Which committee, for clarification?
This is the Parks and Public Spaces Levy Committee. Okay.
Pro or con is the question.
I have provided the information to you, and as I said, I believe voters should have a choice. And my experience with the League of Women Voters, I have been on both sides of issues, so I'm applying as an opponent, but it is primarily simply to get information out to the voters so they have a choice. Okay.
Would you be willing to endorse it and then work in the opposition?
Pardon me?
I was just joking. Are there any further?
I have one more thing to
Oh, you do?
address.
Okay.
Yes. I am not going to speak to the issue later on your agenda regarding Fitzgerald, but in like manner, I sent an email to all of you today for you to look at before you discuss this. And I ran an errand, and when I came back, I found that the email had not gone out to everyone. So I brought copies of my email down so that you have it, and I also brought some for staff so you can consider it when you discuss this. I do have a question regarding that, and you can answer it later, and that is, in the discussion of the agenda, staff indicated that there would later be a public hearing. And so my question is, when you discuss this issue of the Fitzgerald plan and comprehensive plan and code amendments, and you're talking about giving direction to staff about what they are going to do, is that what is going to be the subject of the public hearing, or is the public hearing going to be about what is done once you've decided to give the direction to staff? And so I'm really saying to you right now, in my memo, what I feel should be direction to staff, and hope that I will have an opportunity at a public hearing to address this issue, because it's a planning session, a study session tonight, before you actually get wording down and you're actually looking at the ordinance. Okay.
Great. Well,
So here are your paper copies in case you didn't get the email.
great. Thank you. I did not get the email. Perfect. I left the office at 4, so I didn't get to check emails after that time. So it could be in my inbox. Councilmember Lamb received it. So, answer to your question, I look forward to hopefully receiving some visitors' comments, maybe right following you regarding Fitzgerald. Certainly take what you've written into consideration as well, and throughout the process as people come forward to make comments on Fitzgerald. So then we'll come back for an open session in the near future. I'm not sure when. So, are there further visitors' comments this evening? Ma'am, if you would come forward. I don't have a sign-up sheet for you, so if you would state your name for the record.
My name is Patty Bellasy. I live at 2614 242nd Street Southeast, and I'm responding to the comment about comparables. The University of Washington Bothell Science and Technology building is comparable to an office building for city staff. It is approximately 74,000 square feet, which will accommodate up to 1,000 full-time students. There's 430 classroom seats. There's 11 science laboratories, which are extremely expensive. There are 250 lab seats. There is a 200-seat lecture hall. And the total cost for the building was $68 million. There is no way that you can compare an office building to a science building. That is ridiculous. Questions? I can go on. There's general academic spaces, student support spaces, faculty and staff offices, many things that the City Hall would not have.
Okay, thank you for your time. Any further visitors' comments?
And I can give, if I have any time left, to Bill Morris.
Well, we don't yield time to other speakers who have already had time. So, Mr. Bellasy, if you'd like to come forward.
Hello, my name is Ernie Bellasy, 2614 242nd Street Southeast. Since it's come up a couple of times, I just want to talk about the upcoming bond measure that is going to be chosen on November 4th. And I attended some of the open houses, and I met with the assistant city manager, and then I met with him again in a committee meeting. And my questions are we going to have any public input prior to the vote? Because I know all during the summer in the Bothell Reporter we're going to see all kinds of ads and so forth about this measure, but there's not going to be any give and take on this. So I'd like to know what is the intent of the City Council to have maybe a public meeting sometime in September, early October, not late, and again, more open houses as well. We had the open houses, but they were in May. People are getting ready to go on vacation. I'd like to see them in September when it's closer to the issue. People can actually talk about it and get a feel of how they want to vote. So those are my recommendations to the City Council. I haven't looked at your future agenda, so I really don't know if there's any time in there, but I would appreciate it if you could schedule a meeting where we can have a discussion about this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Bellasy. Any further visitors' comments this evening? Sir, you are next, so you can come up. Councilmember Sandberg does have a quick question.
Are there any plans for additional open houses for the bond levy measure?
We haven't scheduled any as yet.
Okay.
Mr. Challenger. If you would just state your name for the record, we have your address, unless you'd like to give it again.
Good evening, Mayor Freed, members of council. My name is Mike Challenger. I live at 21015 9th Avenue Southeast in Bothell. Early Saturday morning, I got up and noticed that my neighbor's house was virtually missing, having burned to the ground at 3:30 in the morning. I would like at this time to sincerely thank the members of the Bothell Police and Fire Service who attended and gave comfort and help to the residents who fortunately were able to get out, but unfortunately lost all their possessions. Which leads me to a topic of fireworks. We don't know whether fireworks were the cause of the fire or not. As you know, my politics tend to the libertarian, and we celebrate Independence Day, but with independence there are two further words that are important: liberty and responsibility. My daddy, when I was a teenager, said to me, "You can wave your arms around in public as much as you like, but your liberty to do so ends at the end of my nose." As you also know, I am a designer of large rocket engines, which are guided missiles. I could release a Tomahawk missile and I would know exactly where it was going, how long it would take, and where it would land. People who let off these very powerful fireworks they are unguided missiles. They have no foreknowledge of where they will go or what damage they will do. The citizens in an urban, densely populated area like we have the right to expect the liberty not to have fireworks raining down on their houses, damaging their property, terrifying their animals and children. So in spite of being a libertarian, I would like to see the city take up the issue of some sort of control over the release of privately set off fireworks. That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Challenger, it's been a while to see you. It's nice to see you again.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any further comments this evening? Mr. Berry, if you come forward.
Tom Berry, 23305 39th Avenue Southeast. I didn't intend to speak. I came to listen. I sent a copy to the mayor of my comments prior to June 10th because we thought there would be no input. I emailed Councilman Evans a copy today. He may have them. I don't have them. So I will wait till later if there's any more comment to be made, but it's running long now, so I'll go away. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any further visitors' comments? Okay, seeing none, moving on to, well, actually the consent agenda. It's amazing. Consent agenda, 2 items were added, items AB 14104 and AB 14105. Is there a motion to move the consent?
So moved.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and a second by Councilmember Agnew. If everybody would like to place their vote, and if the clerk can display. And vote one more time, if you would. And we'll try it now. How about everybody in favor say aye? Aye. Anybody opposed? This passes unanimously with all council members present. First item on the agenda formally is AB 14106 to consider approval of the professional services agreement with KPF Inc. for design engineering services for State Route 522 Stage 3 improvements. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Freed, council members. Council members, City Clerk will be handing out a revised cover sheet to the agenda bill. There was a minor modification to the total dollar amount for this, which I can get into in just a minute.
Great, thank you.
But thank you. I'm here to ask for approval of the professional services agreement with KPFF for the design of SR 522, the Stage 3 improvements. On February 28th of 2014, our 9 King County annexations went into effect. This included the area and the portion of SR 522 from 83rd Place Northeast in Kenmore to 91st in Bothell. This portion of 522 is the approximate limits of the Stage 3 projects. The key elements of this improvement project would be widening of the general purpose lanes, adding business access and transit, or BAT lanes, in both directions, sidewalks on the north side, center medians, as well as street illumination. The reason for the change to the dollar amount was there are 3 subconsultants to our prime consultant that needed to update their overhead rates, which resulted in a reduction of about $13,000 to the contract amount. So we just that was just brought to light early this week, and so I apologize for the late information. Any questions on the project or the contract?
Questions? Councilmember Sandberg.
I asked mine already. Thank you. But another question came to mind because the last question I asked, which was why
was this improvement prioritized over other transportation needs in the city? And it's great that it's competing well on a federal level, and that we're getting federal grants. But I think that the total construction, so this is design costs, the total construction costs, according to the CFP sheet, is about $48 million, I think. Was that right?
37 million.
37 million, excuse me. And so, do you think that it's going to be it's going to continue to be competitive for additional funding to complete the construction phase?
Yes, the project's been very competitive regionally as well as in the county for the design phase, which we were awarded, as well as the right-of-way phase, which was just recently awarded this last quarter. So our expectation is that the project will continue to be competitive when we're applying for construction funds as well.
So once a project gets design money and right-of-way money, it's pretty much a shoo-in because they're already investing funds for this particular improvement, so it would make sense to continue investing until its completion?
Historically in the region, that's been accurate, yes, from other agencies as well.
And do you are there other corridors in the city that compete well on a regional level? I'm thinking about 527. I know we're doing a lot of improvements right now, 240th up to 228th, but that was a federally funded project?
Correct. Yeah, that's another project I'm managing, and that one was federally funded for all phases of that project.
And do you think that it will continue to be competitive as you're for the section further south on 527, south of the Safeway project, where it narrows back down into 2 lanes?
It's hard to say, depending on the grant and the scoring criteria for each grant as they come available. Some grants prioritize transit and multimodal types of transportation. The 527 corridor has multimodal components. It doesn't have a dedicated BAT lane, such as 522, so it competes a little differently.
Okay, thank you.
Before we move to other council members, I just want to make sure, is there anybody from public who would like to make a comment on this? No? Further questions from council? Councilmember Evans.
So when would the design is what, a year or two process? So what grant cycle would we be looking at competing, or when would we submit this for construction dollars?
The design phase will probably take us through 2015, and sometime in 2015 we'll be obligating right-of-way money. That right-of-way phase will take about a year. And part of the design phase is we're going to look at how best to break the project into phases, as we've done with other projects on 522, and match that the breakout of phases with the funding that's available and the amount of funding that becomes available for the various cycles. So I think 2018, if Eddie knows the cycles a little better than I do, would probably be applying for funds in 2018.
Okay, and these are both state and federal or regional funding?
The 2018 is predominantly the FHWA funding cycle.
Okay.
But we'll also be looking for other funding sources as well through WashDOT and other local.
Great, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, is there a motion to move the recommended action?
I'd move the recommended action.
As amended?
And I'll speak to my motion. Jason, thanks a lot for your presentation tonight, and I really wanted to commend you and our staff for securing the federal funding that will cover the vast majority of this project. We've heard a lot of people talk about the realignments and the different projects that we're doing around our city. These are really, really important projects, and the work that we did around the Wayne Curve to improve that is something that will actually save lives. These are extremely dangerous as undivided roadways, and it's really, really important work you're doing. And thanks a lot for the presentation tonight, and thank you for working so hard to along with other staff members, to get federal funding for this. It's very important.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate it. Any further deliberation? Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote. And the clerk can display. Passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda this evening is AB 14107, public hearing to consider adoption of resolution approving the 2015-2020 6-year TIP or Transportation Improvement Program. I'll formally open the public hearing. And Mr. Steve Morikawa, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council members. AB 14-107 includes the proposed 2015 to 2020 6-year Transportation Improvement Program, which I'll call TIP from now on, for your consideration. Your packet included a staff report that kind of outlined the changes that from last year's 6-year TIP. The second exhibit is the resolution that must be passed, and it has an Exhibit A, which is the actual list that we would send to the Secretary of Transportation. So that's the form in which we would pass it along. I included Exhibit 3, which is the same spreadsheet, but added 2 columns on the right side. One showed the expenditures through 2015, well, up to 2015, and then the total cost of the project. I did this because sometimes if on a large project, it doesn't all fit in that 6-year cycle. It's kind of hard to get a scale on what the total project is about. You also see some notes there. There are some projects in here that are annual projects, like pavement projects, bridge maintenance projects, things like that, which would have kind of a yearly budget on them that reoccurs. Finally, the last exhibit is last year's list in case you wanted to compare them. So this is a planning document. It outlines the city's need in transportation. The capital facility plan, which will be reviewed and adopted later in this year, is the document that actually identifies projects that are of the highest priority, funded, or active. This 6-year TIP presented to you tonight has been closely coordinated with that draft CFP that we're going to present to the committee and eventually will come to the council. Now, unfortunately, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. We either got to come forward with the CFP first or the TIP first, and we're suggesting that we look at the 6-year TIP first because it is a planning document. It has a little bit more leeway. It's our best guess at what we need to do in the city. It's our best guess at costs. But it is important. The RCW, the Revised Code of Washington, basically says it should be adopted July 1st, and we should be sending it up the chain. So we are a little bit late. Now, again, that being said, if for some reason we go through the CFP process and let's say there's a very significant change and we want to alter the 6-year TIP, we can alter the 6-year TIP anytime in the year as long as we get a majority vote of the council and we go through a public hearing process. So I think that one of the things why we're bringing it so early as well is the projects that we go out for grants typically must be listed in our 6-year TIP. If it's not in our 6-year TIP, oftentimes it's not even considered as part of a grant application. This year we've been particularly active in applying for grants, and we want to make sure that we update our 6-year TIP to reflect that. So anything that we're eligible for is reflected in our latest 6-year plan. So again, the document that I gave you, the staff report, quickly goes through some of the changes. I'll go through it really quickly. We deleted some projects because they're either completed or we've consolidated them into larger projects. So if there's a small project and a large project's going to swallow it up, we got rid of the small project. The one project that's out there, Main Street Traffic Safety Project, which was going to address some crossings for pedestrians, we have received a design grant for the Main Street Enhancement Project, and since that incorporates that same thing, and we were able to hang on to the grant funds for this Bridging the Gap project, the smaller project, we're going to cut that one out and just proceed with our Main Street Enhancement design. We've completed a number of projects like Crossroad. We're pretty much wrapping up Bath River Highway widening, the first phase of Multway Boulevard. Some of those will remain on the list because we have some commitments on either plant maintenance, we put trees in, and for the next year or two we have to spend money to water them, make sure they survive the first critical years. Or we've done wetland or stream mitigation, in which we have some requirements from permits to monitor them and upkeep them to make sure we meet our permit requirements. We do have 6 new projects on the list, which I would like to go through quickly, just so you get a feel for why they're incorporated. The first one is the 240th Street Southeast Meridian Southeast Roundabout. That was actually an intersection project standalone, and we also had it as part of our safety project we thought we could squeeze in there, but the roundabout turned out to be more expensive than we thought. What we're going to try to do this year is there are safety grants out there that essentially pays almost 100%, and we're going to go after that, so we would like to put that on the 6-year tip. The pedestrian bridge at Park at Bothell Landing is actually part of the Park at Bothell Landing project. It's a component of that, but it is a key transportation component. It connects us at downtown to the regional trail, and it actually competes very well, and we've tossed it into the federal grant cycle, and we think we're going to get some grant funding out of it to start design on that, and we would like to continue that process through construction as well, so we'd like to list it as a separate project as well. 108th Avenue roadway rehabilitation showed up in our capital facility plan last time around. It was a future project, T51, and that road's kind of on the hillside and needs work and rehab. Since we annexed south of there, that project actually grows longer. There's more of the road to take place. We'd like to put it on the TIP just as a placeholder and something for the future. North Creek Trail, yes, there's another section. We're going to build Section 3 this year, and the north end of that stops at State Route 524, kind of toward 527. Snow County is going to build their side a little bit to the west of that. This piece joins the two. We, again, applied for federal grant funding. We think we're going to get design money for that, so at least we could start design, and we'd like to get it on the tip. The adaptive signal control system is kind of an interesting one. It's actually a Snohomish County-led project. Everett's in there, Bothell's in there, State of Washington's in there, Snohomish County is in there. There's a number of signals between us and South Everett that they want to kind of connect together in this new kind of intelligent adaptive signal control program. We have a few signals that would be in there, and for a relatively small amount of dollars, we can get our signals coordinated with the rest of them up north. The last one is called pedestrian cross beacons for Beardsley Boulevard and 185th. And at one of our capital facility meetings, there's some concern about students trying to get across Beardsley, and the only way they can get across is either at 104 or right there at the UW-Washington Cascade Community College intersection. There's a big gap there where they can't cross with any kind of controlled crossing. Once again, we think there's a safety grant available. We're going to try to apply for that and see what we can come up with and proceed with that project. So that's kind of the recommendation for this year's 6-year tip, and I'd be happy to answer his questions if you have any.
Great. Councilmember Lamb.
Thanks, Steve, for that presentation. So is your thought that that crossing at UW would be incorporated in 21 in sort of a safety upgrade type item, or would it be?
That one is actually an intersection all by itself for vehicles. I think what we're envisioning is more of just a pedestrian
Safety.
only pedestrian call
Okay.
crossing, and it would be separate by itself, and it would
Okay.
qualify for safety grants.
So we're thinking of having a separate line item for that one.
Correct.
Okay.
So it is actually listed as number 55 is a new one, all by itself.
So one question that I had on this list, and I didn't see it, and it may just be that I'm missing it, or it may be that it's not on here, and somebody even reminded me of it today, is 120th, and that roadway, currently part of that is being resurfaced, but a large portion of that road is settling in a way that causes flooding through probably 9 or 10 months out of the year, and it means that one of the lanes there can't be traveled, and it seems like that road is deteriorating every year. Do we have a plan for that, or I know we've talked about that in the past, and I know that there's a lot of different moving parts. That there's the wetlands, there's kind of an elevation issue that there's not a whole lot we can do about. But have you? And if you're not prepared to answer that tonight, that's fine. We could.
I would have to consult with our utility engineer, because I think our utility manager, I think it's secondarily a road problem. It's primarily the water coming across the road. Right. And that's kind of a stormwater issue that we would need to address. So we can certainly consult him. Probably wouldn't appear on the 6-year tip.
Okay.
But it might be something that's part of the surface water plan, which I think they're going through the comp plan now.
Okay.
So it might show up there.
Thank you, because that's something that I would like to see ultimately addressed. And there are some related road problems with, and I know it's being resurfaced right now, but there are some parts of that road that are really, really bad. Okay. And it's very well traveled with trucks from Seattle Times, and it's one that that I'd like to see focused on this. And then the second question I had is on, I think it's on page 2, I can't see, it's 245. It talks about the difference in amount of funding, where it says the funding sort of increase or decrease from last year. And there's a pretty dramatic increase for the annual overlay program. It's like 15 million as I see it.
Okay.
Is that right? Am I reading that correct, that we're putting that much more into it, or is it that it seemed to not necessarily line up with the other numbers, and that kind of leapt out at me, and I like putting more into the overlay, and I just didn't know if that was...
So what I've done with the 6-year TIP, because it's a planning document, what we're trying to incorporate is our plan for grant funding.
Okay.
And as an example, this year we went in and we got some grant funding from Snohomish County. We weren't quite successful in King County, but the numbers in a close year basically reflects grant funding coming in. And what I've done is every 2-3 year cycle where we can go for federal grants, I've assumed we're going to get a certain amount in. So I think when we came in with that talk about the need for pavement, one of the sources of funding was grant funding, and we're
Okay.
tracking that here.
So
So it
that-
does show up there.
Okay, so the increase then is our anticipated increase in grant funding, not necessarily an increase in our capital spend or our funding, or is it both?
Correct. I think we have a little bit, we go up and down a little bit, but generally we're looking for about $850,000 a year of our funds.
Okay.
If we can get match, then we do that. We also, primarily it's federal match that we're going to get to do that.
And is the amount that we're seeking here, or the amount that we're targeting here, is that something that we believe would put us back on track, or put us in a good place in terms of our overlay and street maintenance?
I think what it is given the amount we can put in, the $850,000.
Yeah.
This is basically what we feel we can use and leverage to get through grant funding.
Okay.
And there's a limit to grant funding.
Right.
So we think we're probably close to maxing it out, Eddie, about what we can get every
Okay.
2-3 years.
All right.
So you won't see this ever go higher, and we don't think this is enough, like we told you before,
Right.
to maintain ourselves. But this is pretty much the best we can do and the best we can leverage what we have.
Okay. Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it, and thanks for your presentation.
Councilmember Evans.
Steve, in the CFP, we have, each project has a project information sheet with it and that type of thing. Do we have that same thing for the TIP?
You know, we have not. What's required is for us to come up with this list because it's a planning
Right.
document and submit it. In the
Right.
past, we have. It's taken quite a bit of resources to work that through, and it's not a requirement. So what we have tried to do in past years and recent past years is spend a lot of our time on the CFP because those are the highest priority,
Right.
and then keep our list here.
And I understand that having done CFPs and participated in TIPs, it is a lot of work, tracking those.
Mhm.
But I have several questions about some projects on here that could have been answered had there been a project
Sure.
worksheet with them. So, but I understand the demands of putting those together. But if at some point, even for the general public, if they ever wanted to see what a particular project on here, what that meant, what the breakdown was, there would be some reference point. So, I don't know, maybe we don't go to the extent that we do in the CFP project worksheet, but at least if there could be
Brief description.
2 or 3 sentences or a paragraph or something explains it would be helpful. I think
we
that
can
the
do
public could review. So,
Yep.
so just quickly, I'll just go through a couple of these. Project number 8 and 12 refers to improvements at the intersection of 228th and Bothell Way there. And in fact, we approved funding tonight to hire a consultant to start that process. That's the intersection where there's a question with northbound turns from the west off of 228th going northbound across 405. And I have received numerous concerns. I think Councilmember Sandberg received them as she was campaigning in that area and things too. So I'm really glad to see we did get a federal grant to make those safety improvements, and I know we're moving forward with that. So I hope there's some way that can be communicated to the public, whether it's in our bylines or our Bothell newsletter, whatever the case may be, that, okay, folks, we are going to address this problem. We've got a grant. We're moving forward with it. So I'm glad to see that one is in there. As I added, number 8, I think, is it's the safety improvement. So that's the intersection project, the one that we started to design on tonight, or approved authorization to proceed with the design?
Yeah, it's actually finishing design. We're pretty close to done. We just
Okay,
needed a little
that's
bit more money on that one. So
Okay. And we hope to start that construction in,
it's probably, because of weather and the type of work we're doing, it's probably going to be early next year.
okay. And construction period is how long, approximately?
It should be fairly short. I don't quite know, but I'm guessing a couple months, 2 to 3
Okay.
months. It's not a long project. It's
And just
kind of difficult. It's in that large intersection. It's going to be impactful, but it won't be, it's not like an entire road project.
So what is the project number 12? Is that a different project, or is that tied into that?
It's a different project. We got 2 different safety grants. One was larger than the other. The intersection one was fairly large. It was a couple $1 million. Item number 12 and 13, 228th corridor safety improvements, and the citywide are kind of like spot improvements along 228th, and the citywide does a couple other locations within the city, and it'll do small improvements. Some of them are making signals more visible. Some of them are dealing with access control, things that we feel were critical in terms of driver or pedestrian safety.
Okay.
So that we're also, it's on a similar timeline, and probably early next year you'll see that one go out the door as well.
Great. Project number 11 is 185th Street reconstruction. Can you just briefly explain that? I know, is that, I think, what the college was referring to tonight in their letter we received from them, or was that the safety side of it?
So that's a little different. So the college was referring to getting a crossing across Beardsley Boulevard for pedestrians. This project here is actually working on 185th from Beardsley Boulevard, where the Main Street Fire Station is, all the way to Bothell Way. And that's that corridor, as you remember, is the targeted future transit corridor.
Right.
It's also, once it gets connected up to 98th, going to be one of our through corridors east-west for just general traffic and pedestrians. In the long term, we need to address that corridor. You all know probably the section between 104 and Beardsley is pretty bad. There's some soft soils there. It waves and moves up and down. So this project essentially would readdress back a sidewalk to back a sidewalk on redeveloping that corridor. It's not funded yet. We had to make some priorities, and there's some, as an example, Main Street we felt more critical than this one. So in the past, we had put in some design seed money to try to go and get some grant money. So probably in the next cycle, you'll see that again, so we can try to get that project rolling as well.
Okay.
Right now, it's a little bit further out.
And Project 21 also makes reference to the 185th intersection improvement. That's a separate project.
Yeah.
Part of
so that's the intersection at the fire station. It's that sort of the skewed T intersection, and it's either a signal or a roundabout or something probably wants to go there, especially before transit would get there. So at some point, we will probably want to put something there.
Okay.
Yep.
Just a couple other quick ones. I noticed the annual overlay one that Councilmember Lamb mentioned. The sidewalks, we have funding in here. Project 17 relates to the sidewalk walkway program. When do we determine those actual projects that will be included in that, or are they defined somewhere already?
We do actually have a list. That's, again, one of our annual programs that we typically put a certain amount of money, of our money in, and the money you see here is leveraged and higher because we anticipate getting grant funds.
Okay.
These grant fund cycles are typically more often than every 2 to 3 years. They're more often than every year. We're actually applied for a couple of them this year. We'll find out early next year whether we've gotten them.
Okay.
We do have a priority list of sidewalk projects. And we went through that list, and the grant funding we went for was, I think, one of the projects. We are planning this fall to kind of revisit this list. I think it needs revisiting, and I think the pedestrian program, walkway program needs a stronger look at as a whole. And the staff I have are going to start doing that this fall.
Councilmember Evans, how many more questions?
I'm sorry. Okay. Well, my
We all
I had
enjoyed your
I had a couple others, but I'll. One was the Bothell Connector, which one is near and dear to my heart, and will be discussed later on tonight. So, I guess the question, if the council would decide to eliminate that project, we could take it off the TIP.
Yes, and I think if through the CFP process, something very significant and different than the TIP shows up, we can use the council majority and a public hearing, we can change this and resubmit it.
And then the last comment on the sidewalk one, just to finish up,
I don't plan on using all 5 of my minutes. Would you like 3 of them?
No, I'm going to finish up here. Sidewalks is something that we hear about from our residents all the time. Everybody wants a sidewalk in front of their house. In the public agency I worked for before, we did a lot. We had the same requests. I think every city receives those requests from their residents. But I guess I've seen them funded other ways in addition to just the city putting up money in grants, and that's through the local improvement district. And I think that's something at some point that this council may want to discuss. I'm not sure that residents wouldn't be willing to say, okay, the city's going to put X amount of grants. As a neighborhood, we're willing, if sidewalks are that important to us, we're willing to assess ourselves for some of those improvements too. So I think we can spread our dollars even further if that was of interest to the public and something that the council may want to discuss in the future, but that would be the LID process. But thank you.
Appreciate your questions and comments. Councilmember Sandberg.
Steve, did we have a study session on this this year?
No.
Okay. But I'm encouraged that you said that we can change the items in the TIP later as a result of the CFP planning process. We have the opportunity to change things
Correct. Yeah,
in the year.
There's no number of times you can change it. We would probably just recommend we pass something tonight, and then we change it if we want to go along.
Okay. So I just wanted to bring up some other potential project ideas. These are things that have been either brought forward to us, either through emails, we've discussed it previously, or citizens have contacted me, and so I wanted to bring up a couple of them. The first one is the crosswalk on 100th. We had talked about the feasibility of a crosswalk across 100th Avenue around the location of William Penn Park, sort of in conjunction with the 200th Street improvements. I met with staff and some residents, and so the idea is sort of rolling, but I think one of the purposes of having a list is not just to make projects eligible for grants, but to also give a sense of place and waiting in line. And so I think we've talked about that, and I think it would be appropriate to add it to the TIP. So that's one item. Then another item, another transportation issue that a citizen expressed to me was improvements on SR 527. So we've done some terrific improvements, Safeway, from the Safeway development north up to 228th. But that section between 183rd and 228th is a bottleneck, or has the potential for being a bottleneck now, because it goes from the 4 lanes down to 2 lanes through that section, that stretch by the Dog DeLanda Inn in that area. So I'm presenting that as a potential item for the TIP. And then I have had people express concern to me about traffic on 228th. Around the 19th Avenue intersection, and I'm afraid, I don't know if that's already on our TIP. I'm not really that versed with that particular traffic problem, because I don't live in that area and travel in that area during the times that people have explained to me the problem, but it's in relation to Green Acres residents having, I guess, really busy traffic and issues relating to that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Congestion?
Yeah, congestion at the intersection, and then we also heard about, and you just talked about this, but sidewalks, and then the need for a sidewalk from the Holly Hill area down to the Seattle Times building, and maybe that would be a good conversation to have with residents about having LIDs where residents can, share the cost of sidewalk improvements as opposed to it being 100% on the city, although they feel they've paid for it through their property taxes. But that's another issue. And then does the TIP contain project lists that are like traffic speed studies, or is that someplace else?
There are a few analyses here, like the Transportation Master Plan, Downtown Parking Management Plan, Transit Center Feasibility Study. So there are some analyses here. And if there is a big problem, like I think there's an intersection here that we have an analysis, a wish list for some funds to look at it and analyze it and figure out what we can do with that. So there are those types of those projects.
Well, I have heard a lot about the speed limit on 100th Avenue, and then it becomes 19th in Snohomish County. The speed limit there is 35, and then the parallel arterial 104th, the speed limit is 25. And so I've heard a lot of comments about how excessive that speed is on 100th Ave and how that roadway doesn't have the same structure like sidewalks and that in comparison to its 104th Avenue counterpart, which has a slower speed limit. So I would like to mention that as a potential TIP project. And so I know that what you want to do is approve the list tonight as is, and I'm fine with that. I'd be happy to work with you to clarify what those additional items are, so that when we hear the CFP again in the fall, and then we can discuss these issues and then see if there's council support to add those to the TIP.
So may I address your list?
Yeah, sure.
It might help out a little. So the crosswalk on 100th at Penn Park, depending on the need there, as an example, if there's a full PED call signal requirement, that might cost us $150,000 or something. That might be a project. If it's a little bit of sidewalk work, if it's striping work, we may be able to include that as part of our sidewalk program, just a part of it, as well as we have operational striping program, which we could cover that. So I think that's one you're working with Jamal, and I think that's one it's already on our radar, and we can propose something if it rises to the project level. If not, we may be able to do it within the budget that we're going to talk about the end of this year. The 527 or Bath Everett Highway between 188th and 240th is already on the list. It's project number 39. It's just a matter of trying to fund it and prioritize it. So we recognize that is something we want to build to 4 or 5 lanes in the future. It is kind of a difficult section. It's got steep hills on one side and wetlands on another. So it might be, unless there's a developer willing to take on those challenges, it might be all on the city trying to get federal funds to help us do that. But it is on the list. The 19th and 228th, I know we're doing some safety work there, I think. But I'd like to talk to whoever you talk to about the congestion. And then again, we can see what we can and cannot do, what the issue is. If it's an operational issue, we might be able to take care of it without a project. If it's obviously adding a lane or something like that, it might rise to the project level again. The Holly Hill to Seattle Times sidewalk, that would be one that would be covered by our walkway program, and we would just get it on our priority list and try to prioritize it. And as it moves up the list, we can try to get funding for that. So I don't think we'd need it a separate project. And then the speed limit one, again, I think I would talk to our transportation engineer, traffic engineer, and find out what the issue is there. Speed and sidewalks are kind of two different things. Sidewalk, it would have to be our sidewalk program, or if the whole roadway has issues as an arterial, it would be a larger project. But if it's a speeding issue, that may be more of an operation issue we can look at. So I think between a mix of things, I would say most of these are covered, but your concerns may eventually generate a project if we find out that's what the solution needs to be.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Other council members have questions? Councilmember Agnew.
You have your pencil ready?
Sure.
Okay, I got one more. With Piper's Glen going in, I've heard from a number of residents in Valhalla about a crosswalk. It's next to impossible to get across that street between 4 and 6. And the people in Valhalla, I hate to say it, are getting older. The old statement, you buy in Valhalla, you die in Valhalla, I think is fairly accurate. But we really need to do something about that crosswalk.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
My goodness, I can't control myself. Councilmember Ray.
In listening to the discussion, it's coming apparent to me. So, what is the process to get projects on this list, or how do residents bring to the attention of city staff the projects that they would like to have on the list, whether they're funded or not? Or
So I know council members get calls, staff gets calls as well. So we hear about concerns about 228th and 527. We hear about sidewalks that people are interested in having, and we basically, when we get that, we put them on the list, and we can't promise them that they rise to the top of the list, but we certainly listen and we try to prioritize it. That's typically the process. We have a CFP process that we have an open house. We got some input there. So the CFP and the TIP will probably reflect if there's a project generated from that open house. We didn't feel this year to have two open houses. We had 6 people come with 24 comments. I think we added number 55 based on that. And we're trying to beef up some of our safety programs because there are some bike issues that we can incorporate into some of the line items we already have. So it may show up as, rather than asking for $25,000 a year, you ask for $35,000 a year or something like that. So right now, those are the methods that we have. And
so, if anybody's watching, the idea is to call either one of us, or probably better to have them call staff if they have a transportation project they'd like to see in the.
Yes, and the 6-year tip comes up no less than once a year. So that's pretty often in the building world. It takes us a while to get something funding, designed, and built. So every year is pretty often. So yes, if they have interest, give us a call and we can look at it.
And the only other comment I had was I appreciate the increase in the funding for the overlay program, or the intention at least to get there with grant funding. And I feel like I've been heard, and I really appreciate that from staff. So thank you.
So we actually used to have a transportation committee, and my memory is weak even at the age of 40. But I think Councilmember Ewing, Tobin, and myself were on that when it was done away with. And we were on the utility committee as well. We got rid of that and then replaced it with this capital facilities committee, which had a lot of conversation with transportation. So when is the CFP meeting again? Next week. And who is on that? So you were on that? I'm on that. Councilmember Lamb, good. So it's a pretty interesting process to talk about all the projects within the city, and I think one that's very insightful. My question, I only have one this evening, is on the 240th Street Southeast Meridian Avenue Southeast roundabout. You're deciding not to do this as a traffic light, but rather as a roundabout. Is that because we have better chances of getting federal funding if it's a roundabout?
I think operationally, and I think Eddie might have more information on that, but I think operationally it'll probably work better that way. I think that's the resolve.
And there's adequate room to do so, or do we have to relocate the house on the south?
I think there's adequate room. There's quite a bit of right-of-way there. What we found was we were trying to do it with a traffic circle, and it just didn't work. One of the things we had to deal with is we've been working with the North Shore School District and the buses, and they just couldn't make it around. So we scrapped that idea. We're coming back at it as a larger project standalone, and we're going to go after grant funds and see where we get with that.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Steve. Any further questions? Deputy Mayor Spivey.
A couple things. One is the 39th extension. That project, I would like to have that project change to no longer be the extension. I think there's other alternatives that are less money using the existing right-of-ways that we have. And for example, maybe roundabouts at the 4 intersections that people would take to get over to 120th. Roadway improvements, widening some roads. I'd like to consider that when we do start talking about it. And I was just curious where 188th going up the hill from QFC sits on the sidewalk project list, and somebody can get back to me at a later date. And then, again, a lot of questions, great questions were asked and answered, but I did notice it's probably a Scrivener's error. Between pages 241 and 243 are the same, but 245 adds the 200th street project. So it throws numbering off. And I want to say, where is it? On 245, it's item number 9, Northeast 200th Street Sidewalk Sewer Improvements, and it's not on page 241 or 243. So if you're looking at this document, then you go from one to the other, it changes in the numbering a little bit.
So 245, I believe, is the older TIP.
Well, it says 2014 to 2019 TIP number 9.
Right. And then we're working on the 2015 to 2020.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So
No,
it is a little
then there's no Scrivener's error.
Yeah. The numbers
So-
are almost close, but they're
Yeah.
a little bit off. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Great. Seeing we're at a point where we may close public hearing, I just want to confirm there was nobody from the public that wished to make any comment. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So I would move to close the public hearing at this time, and I would move to approve the recommended action.
So we have a motion by Councilmember Lamb and second by Councilmember Agnew. Close the public hearing and move the recommended action. Any discussion?
I'll speak to my motion briefly. I think we had a good discussion tonight, and I think there were a lot of good ideas, many of which I hope we can follow up on tonight. I think that we have improved funding of overlays, and I think a lot of good work is in here. As was indicated, the Capital Facilities Committee will be meeting next week, and I think through that process, listening to other council members and listening to the community, we'll have an opportunity to refine this at a later time if that is necessary. But I support the motion and encourage my colleagues to vote yes.
Great. Further comments? Deliberation? All right. Seeing none, if everybody could place their vote. And if the clerk can display, passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda is, how much time do we have scheduled for this evening? 45, hour and 45. So I'm wondering, do you want to jump into it before break or go to break first?
It's up to you. I don't think this will take an hour and 45 minutes. I think that was intended to account for the 2 study session items.
Okay. So why don't we just jump in right now, and if we find ourselves a little bit after 8, then we can make a decision at that point to go into break. So this is AB 14108, a study session for council input regarding 2015-2016 budget focus areas and desired budget outcomes. Mr. Stowe, good to see you.
Good. Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. Just a few brief comments, then I'm going to share the responsibility to answer any questions that Council might have with Finance Director Shackman. As has been the city's practice for many years, maybe the last 8 or 9 years, I've come before you and have asked for your input on 2 matters. One is budget focus areas, and the other is what we've been calling, or have called for the last many years, desired council outcomes. Budget focus areas are more general themes that supports the organization's mission and vision, and typically don't change from year to year. In fact, we've had the same budget focus areas for the past several bienniums, and I'm not proposing that we change those at this time. Desired budget outcomes, however, are very specific, and they do change from one biennium to the next biennium depending upon the council's interest. And so we have indicated or provided you a list of what we would propose based on conversations we've had over the last couple years, input that we've received at council meetings, and input staff has received directly from the citizens. And those are presented on attachment 4. They're labeled as 2015-2016 draft desired budget outcomes. These, I believe, fit with the city's strategic actions and strategy that was detailed for you in a memorandum back in 2011 by Finance Director Shackman, really trying to position us to get back to a financial position that we were at prior to the recession. And of course that includes establishing a reserve level for our general fund, reestablishing our asset replacement reserves to be able to fully fund 10 years of asset replacements, and then replenishing again our operational reserves back to the pre-recession levels. And of course that requires discipline in terms of the new revenue that we do have coming in as a result of our economy is improving, that we apply it first to those items before we move into other enhancement of services that we haven't provided in the past. So there are a series of desired budget outcomes that we provide for discussion this evening, and we look forward to council's questions in your direction regarding this matter.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your presentation this evening. Are there any questions from council? Councilmember Evans.
Thank the city manager for the presentation. As I was reviewing this, the desired budget outcomes specifically, and I spoke briefly with Bob about this today, is I like the idea of getting our reserves back up to the 15%. I think that's critical. And the other part of that second bullet there, the last portion of it talks about establishing strategies for reinstating pre-recession operating funding levels. And we rely on the staff to provide us a lot of recommendations and suggestions for this, but I guess I would challenge the council to really put our thinking hats on or look around and see what other agencies are doing and see what new strategies that we can bring to help do this. I think the staff does a great job in giving us examples and opportunities and that type of thing, but we all come in contact with other cities and things that are going on there and how they're approaching things. So maybe as we get into that budget discussion, would challenge the council to come with some suggestions or comments of things that we might see that would work or should be considered in our budget deliberations. So,
great, thank you, Councilmember. Any further comments, questions? Yes, sir.
Do we have an idea of when we would reach the 15% general fund reserve?
I would assume that it would happen probably in the 2015, if not sooner. We could actually get up to the 15% by the end of the year. Just depends on how the rest of the year goes. If we continue on the trend that we're on, we will actually meet the 15% by the end of the year.
And then where are we at on the, well, obviously we're sustaining the current levels of service levels. The funding for the current service levels we're good there, or do we need to increase funding?
Our service delivery levels were never really dropped due to the economy. They would have dropped had the aftermath of the recession gone any longer, but we were able to utilize resources. We had an operating reserve. We took the strategy of not doing certain maintenance, such as pavement. Did everybody get the memo, the quarterly report memo from 2011? Okay, that really speaks, and I know Councilmember Rayam, we talked about what the strategy was at the time when council was making these really tough decisions as to, do we use the operating reserve? What's the right level to use? What strategies do we need to put in place in order to make it through this, and how long is it going to last? So there was a strategy that we followed, and we've been very successful. We're just coming to the end of that strategy, and we're at the place where it's time to reinstate the reserves. Whenever you use reserves, you implement a strategy to replace them. Once those are reinstated, our next step is asset replacement. That will take into the next biennium. Hopefully one-time revenues will come in that we will quickly be able to do that.
once that happens, then we go on to operating and maintenance costs that maybe have been put off, such as pavement and that type of thing. That will actually be addressed through the CFP process too. There will be a recommendation that will come to the council. And through the budget process, we will look at allocating certain monies, one-time monies, towards pavement and parks and those type of things, where council will have the opportunity to make those decisions like Councilmember Evans was talking about. So we really, even though it's been a long period of time, multiple bienniums, there has been a strategy, we have been following it, and we've been successful. So I think we really need to stay on the path that we're on. And then when we come to the point of reestablishing those really important maintenance items that we haven't been able to keep up on, or we made a choice not to keep up on, that's when we all need to put our heads together and talk about other one-time revenues or new revenues that are coming in from downtown. How are those going to be allocated, and what are council's priorities for those monies, and to actually set up a strategy and a policy that will be followed far into the future, so that we do meet and have, the beautification, the pavement, and all the different things that people look for in their community. And once they're addressed and the policy is set, it will continue to go forward until we hit another downturn in the economy, at which point we'll have to make tough choices again. And I have no doubt that once again we'll be successful with those choices, because we have proven that together that's what we do.
So when you say asset replacement, what can you elaborate a little bit on what that means? What are the assets we need to replace before we start upping our maintenance and operations?
Yeah, asset replacement in our city is a little different than most. Our asset replacement includes everything. That's when we bring our budget to the city manager's recommended budget to the council. What we bring is very little new items, because everything that we can put into asset replacement we do. If it's a cyclical item that we know we're going to be purchasing, whether it's the SCBA mask for the firemen, or the vests for the police officers, or IT equipment, the hardware, anything that this city purchases that we know we're going to replace that is over $5,000, or if combined, the masks, that type of stuff, anything, building equipment, roofs, everything is in our asset replacement fund. So when we bring the budget to the council, we say a couple of really important things. Asset replacement is fully funded for the next 10 years. That means today we could pay for everything we need for the next 10 years. That's our goal. Or we come and we say asset replacement is here, we need to put money towards this, or in 5 years somebody's going to need a police car, a fire truck, or park equipment. Got to make sure we get everybody in there. And so we can talk about a strategy to make sure we don't get to a place where we fall into a hole. Okay? Then when we talk about budget, when we come together, all we have left to talk about is operating costs. These are our actual operating costs to perform the duties that people do, whether it's paper, pencil, those type of operating costs, or professional services. What type of professional services are the departments needing during this 2-year period? Those are what the council is really looking at. Overtime. And then you get into new capital. Okay, do we need to add to our fleet? Do we need to maintain a bridge? We do that through our capital facilities plan. So we really do run our budget differently than a lot of cities do. And we do this because, for one, we don't jump on the bandwagon with every new thing that comes along. You wait and see how it works for people, and make sure that it is viable. I've watched cities change the methodology that they use for a budget, and that oftentimes has a very negative impact on staff, causes morale problems and that type of things. Staff need a process that is routine and that they can maintain and continue to do the same thing. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make the process that you have better. Okay, we can always make our process better. We can make it more open. We can, there's lots of things that we can do. But the process that this city is using has been very successful. I would be I think it's something the council can be very proud of, and I think you can go back and look at our financial reports and the management decisions that were made during the economic downturn to see that not only is our budgeting good, but it has proven itself and it works. So anyway, did I answer that question? All right, probably way more than you wanted.
A couple other ones. All right, that was all the questions I had. Thank you.
Great. Any further? Deputy Mayor Spivey.
Good. Great, thank you. As I recall, before the recession, we were at a 20% reserve and not a 15%. And I would like us to get back to that 20%. I think it served us well. So I think it's important that we meet that 15% milestone, and then, as the director was saying, plan for getting to where we were to that 20%, because I believe it did serve us well. And if we only had 15, we might have been doing those service cuts that we avoided this time. I know that there's things, maybe this isn't the right time or whatever, but I know there's things that I'd like to see coming up in the budget. I know our firefighters need ballistic vests. I don't know why when they had them and they went away, they just weren't replaced as part of with the PDs or something. But I know they need those to do their job. I know that through the RFA process, working with our consultant, one of the number one things that's valued by our citizens is to have highly trained firefighters. And so I want to make sure that our training budget for those guys is there where it needs to be, as well as for police, as well as for public works. That training seems to be one of those things that gets, when times are hard, we eliminate different types of training, and I want to make sure that all of our employees are getting the training that they should, and to do their job the best they can, and to grow as employees. So I think that's important also. So those are some of the things on a high level that I would like to see come forward in our budget.
Any further comments? Councilmember Sandberg? I think we'll just press through for the next few minutes and see if we can get through this.
So I had, speaking to process, I had forwarded an email to both you and Bob about what Redmond does, and to kind of spur the thought on how we can make our process better, our budgeting process better. And Redmond sent out an email to everybody on their distribution list, resident or not, because I got it, that said, hey, we're embarking on this budgeting process, and go to this website and give us your budget priorities. And I'm not saying that that's the best way to do it, because I went to that website and all you did was vote on 6 buckets. And that doesn't really inform staff. I mean, that doesn't give you really any feedback. But I think I would like us to talk about how we can make the process at least transparent, and even an educational experience for people in the city, because this is the most important thing that we do. This is where all of our priorities flow from. And a citizen might not necessarily have a specific need or desire, but they might really benefit from a process that educates them about what a city budget is, how it's set, how you develop priorities, and how you have an impact on that. And so I'd love to have your ideas on how we might improve the process.
Actually, years ago, probably 6 years ago, before the recession, I did a lot of research on the priority government budgeting. There's in any profession, you have the people who jump out there on any new methodology or that type of thing. I tend to be the typical accountant who is more conservative, and I like other people to spend their money and their energy and their staff time on some of these new ideas before I'm willing to put my staff through that or to spend money. I like to sit back and watch for a couple years, just see what it works, because a lot of times what you see is like zero-based budgeting. You know, there's different budgeting processes that people employ, and the interesting thing about them is one might work really well for one department in the city, but not for another. So we use a modified approach in budgeting. Some of it's incremental, some of it is zero-based. Sometimes zero-based is overkill for a small department. So I like to look at the different departments that we have. The areas where I believe that we could improve, and what I saw with a lot of them, you can pick out the gems within each process. And the great thing about government or priority government budgeting is that it involves the community at such a low level within the organization. And again, that's great for service delivery departments. It's not so great, and it doesn't work well for internal departments such as the finance department. Okay, or the HR department. So I think it would be a great thing to look at. That type of government budgeting, by the way, usually takes 18 months to 2 years to actually implement. And it's very staff intensive, very, very staff intensive. And the reason that I shied away from it at the time was because we literally did not have the staff time to employ that. But I have kept the documents, I have read them, and I do think that there's positive things that we can do and employ to make our process better. And I think that goes right along with reinstating our M&O. It's building on a positive strategy that you already have in place and adding those things that are beneficial, and not trying to recreate the wheel all the time, because you have to have a lot of staff if you want to recreate the wheel all the time. We have a lot of projects going on, and we have a lot of people working on downtown revitalization and trying to maintain parks and that type of thing. So when we do implement new items or new processes, we really want to make sure they're the right ones, and it's not just frustrating to staff. So does that answer your question? Is there something specific that you're looking for that you liked about what they were doing? Because I like the idea of what they are doing, but I would probably go about it a little bit different way, because you can have, people on the internet answer 6 questions, and then you decipher that you don't know who really is offering that information or how many times. I would really want a more scientific type of study done, or to use multiple methods of bringing in the public and the staff and that type of thing.
Well, what I liked about the Redmond process was this wide distribution to the public. And you could do it through our email distribution list, through the local paper. What I liked about it was the invitation to come participate. And there was a schedule of dates that were far enough in the future and spread out. So there were some dates in, I don't know, it seems like there was some dates in June and then October. And so I liked that idea. It was an outreach, an honest outreach effort that looked like there was a schedule there where people could plan well in advance to participate. So I like that.
Areas that they're interested in. And I like that too. And I think this conversation is part of the conversation within the desired budget outcomes, where it talks about reinstating what we already have, because what you're referring to is a budget process that, again, is very staff intensive and would require additional staff. And I think that probably what we can come up with and what we can communicate with the staff that we have is what can we do with what we have to get started. And then as those new monies come in, this could be one of the items that we want to, put more expenditures into, such as additional staff that, PIOs, okay, because that really is very PIO intensive to do those type of things. But there's things that our staff can do and would actually be excited to do. It's fun to interact with the community on the things that we're working on very hard and very committed to, and to get their input and to help people understand why we do what we do and how we do it, and the impacts of that. So,
I mean, it sounds like we're kind of saying the same thing, and I don't like the idea of a very simple web-based survey. I don't think that that's informative at all. So, and then you create the expectation that people voted, and then you can't deliver on that expectation, and you don't even know really what that expectation is when they just vote in one of 6 buckets. So,
right.
It sounds like you have some ideas for how we can reach out to the public, and we have time. It's July now. This process doesn't start until October or November, and so I might have unrealistic expectations of how much people want to participate, but I think it still looks it looks good on the city's part to make that outreach effort.
I like the idea of educating on what we're doing and how we do it, because I do believe that we don't really know what people in other departments do, or as a community, you don't know what all the people that are working for your community are doing. And I think that if we take the budget process in the actual CM proposed budget and then educate as far as how it was derived, the process that we go through, and get input, and then we can take that input and look at how do we want to do it the next time. Are there things that we can do better?
Are you wrapped up?
I am wrapped up. I just wanted to say that when we look at the bullets, the outcomes on page 254, when it says like utilizing, one-time revenues or that sort of thing, we can think about specifically saying we want to use those one-time revenues for something specific, like asset replacement, like city beautification, not just utilize them most effectively. I would like us to, when we're looking in the future, talk about when we do have those one-time monies, is there something specific we wanted to go for?
And this is the time to do that. This is what I'm talking about, of being strategic about when we implement these monies, these new monies, when we implement reinstatement of monies. It doesn't mean it has to be reinstated the way it was previously. It means what's the smartest way to put this money back into our budget. So those are our conversations that we will be having, and this CFP process will bring some of that to light to begin with, and then it will go from there into the budget process.
Great. So we're going to go to break for 15 minutes, and when we come back, we'll hear from Councilmember Lamb, Agnew, and potentially myself. All right, so 8:25 on this item. Yeah, because everybody else has had a chance to speak but the three of us. Bothell City Council is back in session. We are on AB 14108, a study session regarding council input for the 2015-2016 budget focus areas. 3 council members have not been able to speak. Would you like to take your opportunity to do so now?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I really appreciate the work that staff has done on this, and I appreciate the work and the context that our finance director put on this discussion, because I think this really is kind of where we have an opportunity to give our staff direction. And what the priorities that have been laid out here are ones that reinforce the posture that the city has taken, which is a very, very conservative one with our finances in terms of weathering the greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression, managing our resources as a city, managing and sort of overnight dramatic decline in revenues, and still keeping our personnel intact and keeping our service level intact as much as we could. I think when we look at these issues, if people don't agree with that, if people are like, I don't want to replenish the reserves, instead I'd rather put it into M&O, this is the time to have that conversation. I think the fiscally conservative thing to do is absolutely to replenish the general fund reserves. I think that should be our first priority. I think that really set us apart from other jurisdictions during the Great Recession that had to deal with devastating personnel cuts and devastating cuts up even to public safety in that time. So I'm intrigued by what what Deputy Mayor Spivey discussed about having a higher level of reserves, of getting back up to 20%. I don't know that I would necessarily make that the priority prior to asset replacement, because I think there's a cost in terms of doing that, but I think that we should have that conversation as part of our ongoing budget priorities. I don't have any proposed changes. I think this has outlined the fiscal policies of our city that have served us well in times that were good, in times that were not good financially, and I appreciate the work of our finance director and council in terms of establishing these. So I support these outcomes because these are the policies of the city that helped us weather the recession, and I think they were the right policies.
Councilmember Agnew.
I agree with the Councilmember Lamb and Deputy Mayor Spivey that I'd like to see the reserve increase to 20% at some point in time, but not at the expense of asset replacements. I want to thank staff for the job that they've done. They've done an outstanding job. I think we did fare much better than a lot of agencies and a lot of municipalities through this fiscal instability. So thank you much for your efforts.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I do want to add one thing, and that is when we go and have a bond rating or anything along those lines, or somebody's looking at our financial reports for the city, the asset replacement fund is really an add-on to our operating reserve, because even though it's a separate fund, those monies are general fund monies, and they have been transferred to the asset replacement basically to dedicate them towards a purpose, but the council can change that at any time. So when you really look at our operating reserve, it's important to look at the asset replacement fund level also. The adding to 20% is important, but that asset replacement, to me, 15 is the standard for a city of our size, and with the number of revenue resources that we have. The bigger, believe it or not, the bigger a city gets and the more resources that you have, the less reserve you have to have. It doesn't seem like it makes sense, but that's the way it is. So my recommendation is to increase the operating reserve to 15%, get the asset replacement reserve up to 10% fully funded, and then add in the other 5 if that's what council chooses to do. But I think setting aside those asset replacement funds are extremely vital. I would actually say to you that I think it's more important to the city right now than adding to our operating reserve.
Great. Thank you so much, Tammy. I've appreciated since my first council retreat sitting in a meeting and watching your demeanor as you were answering questions from one very difficult council member at that time. You took those questions with great poise, and you have continued to do so in my tenure of 9 years here. So appreciate your leadership and your director position.
Thank you very much, but I don't do it alone.
Yeah. And you,
Thank you.
Every time I say that, you always refer to your team, which points to you again.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who work very hard. Thank you
so much for the way you've approached it. I only have 2 comments this evening, and one is on page 255. I know that we're saying that all 5 of these are important items: financial stability, economic development, quality of life, community connections and involvement, and the last, public safety. I tend to look at things in order of importance and think that they're at the top of a list. And so if I would have the privilege, I would love to see public safety moved up to right under economic development, and some may argue to have that in front. And my mindset is, obviously we need to have a financially stable city. I believe that we need to stimulate economic development in order to pay for a very strong public safety and security. So that's a comment I'd love to see support on coming in the future. And then on the back, this 4th bullet point down, or arrow, it says continue to utilize the city's 1%. I would like to rather say potentially utilize the city's 1%, because I know that you're getting a commitment from council to increase taxes every year going forward, or even next year. So how do you feel? It's our decision?
Honestly, I think the 1% is easier for people to have happen each year than to have a levee lid lift or something large happen all at once. And I'll give you an example. We talk about the park at Bothell Landing, okay, and the need for the community. With 1% for the property tax, that adds only a couple of dollars to somebody's property tax bill on a $300,000 house. Okay, so it's not a significant increase. It is an increase, but it's not significant. But when you combine it citywide, and over a 6 to 8 year period, you're talking about $2 million a year, because it compounds of, monies coming in. And so it does have an impact, and those are dollars that can actually be allocated towards a certain purpose, or, for training or reinstate training, that type of thing. So I would be, property taxes are stabilizing revenue source. We have 3 revenue sources that we rely on, and 2 of them are very dependent on the economy. Property tax is not. Okay, even through the downturn, our property taxes were collected at nearly 99% of what was levied. So people have a choice if they want to turn down their electricity. They have a choice if they have a phone or cell phone or that type of thing. And so when the economy goes down, those are the things that people do in order to decrease costs at their house. But a few dollars on their property tax bill, I don't think has as much of an impact as those items. So I would maintain the property tax before I would the others.
Great.
Okay? It gives the community more flexibility.
Perfect. So every council member's had an opportunity to give some input into the process, and so I think we'll move forward to September, right? Good. Before we jump on to the next item on our agenda, which is Fitzgerald Sub-Area, I just want to remind all council members that when your microphone is on, you are being recorded. Okay. I was notified by the clerk that when your microphone is on, even when we go into break, we are being recorded. So, right? Is that correct? Yeah, the machine won't stop. So maybe take any comments in the back if you don't want them to be recorded and part of the record. There's no issues that I'm bringing up that are some secret things that have been divulged. I'm just warning everybody because I received the input, and I thought everybody else should have it as well, because I've watched Bill Clinton and George Bush all be recorded with statements that maybe they wouldn't want public. You're going to watch it. All right, so moving on to the next item on the agenda, AB 14109, study session to discuss potential plan and code amendments concerning a portion of the Fitzgerald 35th Southeast Sub-Area. Mr. Bruce Blackburn.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. I thought I'd just take a few moments and kind of go through a little bit of a background on the area. Back in 1994, when the city did its first Growth Management Act, or GMA, comprehensive plan, the area was designated as an R40,000 growth reserve. The intent was to use this area in the future in case we had to had problems with the targets. Now, some of the things changed, of course, over the years. One, of course, was in 1996 and again in 2000, the Growth Management Act Hearings Board, basically those are the people who interpret the Growth Management Act, established a bright line ruling that within urban areas you had to have at least 4 dwelling units per acre. Now, what that means is that you had to do that unless you had critical areas that were large in scope and had a high function and value. Now, in response to those rulings, the city did an analysis of the entire area, the entire city, where we may have had designations of less than 4 dwelling units per acre. And the investigation identified that within the Fitzgerald sub-area, we did indeed have critical areas that were large in scope and high rank order. Now, during the same time frame is that the City of Bothell and Snohomish County partnered in investigating solutions to improving north-south travel within the area. And this term was called the Bothell Connector. And there were 3 routes that were really kind of evaluated. One was the route of 39th Avenue. This is the new roadway. One was using the existing 35th Avenue. And the other was kind of like this hybrid approach on 35th Avenue. After an extensive public process, which included open houses, notifications, meetings, and issuance of draft and final impact statements, the councils for the City of Bothell and Snohomish approved a 39th Avenue alignment. as well as, of course, the city and county issued a notice of action, which kind of committed to the city and the county to this proposal. Now, all of these factors came into play, and the city identified that there were some changed circumstances that suggested the city should reevaluate the original assignment of the R40,000 growth reserve designation within this subarea. To assist that effort, the city sought a better, more complete understanding of the curricular areas and fish and wildlife habitat found within the area, and hired a professional consulting firm, Parametrics, to conduct a study. Now, Parametrics did the study. They made a number of analysis, conclusions, and made some specific recommendations, which included a bunch of provisions that would assign specific regulations. And essentially what Parametrics identified was in their study is that the regulations needed to be more than our current city provisions to preserve the forest habitat and the fish and wildlife habitat within the area. And the regulations basically included retaining or creating large areas of forest cover up to 50 to 60%, limiting the amount of effective impervious area to 10 to 20%, and utilizing low-impact development, surface water runoff, water quality control features. Now, the regulations themselves are kind of on this table. Essentially what it is, would depend upon the zone that was established within the area. You would either have a 50 or 60% forest retention or creation, an effective impervious area of 10 to 20%, use of low-impact development surface water features, and those are bioretention swales, rain gardens, and things of that nature. There were some wildlife corridors established, as well as some modifications were allowed within the regulations that allowed people to use low-impact development, basically things that you could do road width modifications and use pervious pavements, as well as do some lot area and lot width reductions. Now, the purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the concerns of a bunch of property owners who have identified that developers have not pursued development within this area because these LID overlay regulations are just too difficult to understand and too costly to implement. Now, since 2007, when the regulations were first implemented, the city has processed just one 4-lot subdivision that is subject to the LID regulations. No other applications have been submitted. Now, to better understand the property owners' concerns, the Community Development Department interviewed 3 development companies which had previously expressed interest to the property owners about developing within the area. And this basically slide identifies what those main concerns of the property owners were, and that's basically within the staff report as well. One was uncertainty. The developers identified that the regulations were overly complicated and left too much open to interpretation. There was that they identified concerns with the dwelling unit yield and deduction of surface water facilities and curriculars and buffers from lot unit yield. Basically, the idea is that those are features that have to be deducted before we can determine how many lots or dwelling units the application can have. One was the impervious surface coverage limitations. Basically, the developers identified that the 20% maximum effective impervious surface area is too vague and does not allow them to attain the underlying zoning designation of R5100A. The other one was forest cover. The developers identified that the forest cover provisions were very complex and very science-based and were simply too difficult to understand and led to a lot of confusion and uncertainty. One of the developers identified to us that they had 3 different staff people within their office look at those forest cover provisions, came up with 3 different responses. So that was that's an issue as well. Another is wildlife corridors. There are some certain wildlife corridors within the sub-area that have been identified. And the developers identified, look, we have sometimes utility or road crossings that have to go through there. The wildlife corridor provisions are not necessarily easy to understand, and they also may prohibit us being able to do that. Finally, of course, is the 39th Avenue connector, which we've had a little discussion about that this evening as well. The developers expressed quite a bit of concerns about the potential of the city to require significant development contributions or even construction of what has become a very costly roadway. Finally, the developers identified a few items related to the property values and the shortness of the feasibility studies that really are not part of the city's purview. Now, I'm just going to go through and identify some of the potential approaches I provide to the council for tonight. On the uncertainty, our recommendation is to make multiple revisions to simplify the language, utilize more lay person terms, and, where feasible, use terminology from city-wide regulations. One alternative to that would be to, of course, remove all the overlay regulations in total and apply just citywide standards for these areas. We don't really recommend that approach as a staff because we know that the study has identified that we need to do a little bit something more to protect this wildlife habitat within the area. On the dwelling unit yield and deduction of critical areas and buffers from lot unit yield, staff has recommended that we implement some special lot and dwelling unit yield regulations to be applied exclusively within the LID areas. And that essentially includes the ability to not deduct surface water facilities. Now, when you're doing low impact development, you're spreading a lot more surface water facilities. They're larger in area, much more wide in scope. We believe that if you were to allow those areas to be counted toward lot or dwelling unit yield, you would really kind of help the developers do this, implement these provisions. And of course, an alternative to that would be allow a partial credit, let's say like 50% or 60% or something like that for those particular facilities. On the impervious surface coverage, staff has also recommended that we make some substantial revisions to those provisions to reflect a lot of the updates that's happened within the City of Bothell's surface water manual. Now, since 2006 and 2007, when this was first envisioned, there were a lot of changes to our surface water design manual that have really brought us up to speed way better. In fact, Councilmember Yoon is quite familiar with those. And we're also recommending that we up the impervious surface standards a little bit from 20 to 35% in the R5400A, 10 to 25% in the R9000, and 10 to 20% within the R40,000 designations. And of course, one alternative, which I think is a viable alternative, would be to remove any impervious surface limitation provisions and rely upon the forest cover standards and the mandatory use of low-impact development facilities, and implement more rigorously the new Bothell Surface Water Manual low-impact provisions as well. Of course, further, we all know that the Department of Ecology is going to be issuing even more stringent surface water provisions that will be implemented in about 2016. As far as forest cover concerns, we again recommend that we greatly simplify the forest cover regulations and also reduce the amount of forest cover required by a slight degree. And we've done some calculations and done some little analysis to try to figure out what that number should be. And we believe within the R5400A zone, we take it from 50% to 40%, within the 9600 zone from 60% to 50%, and within the R40,000 zone from 60% to 50%. One alternative would be, of course, to keep all the fancy scientific language we had, because it's a really science-based document, but then just reduce the forest cover percentages and just do it that way. But the developers have identified that they are concerned as much with the complexity of the regulations as they are the number of forest areas that have to be preserved. Regarding the wildlife corridors, we also believe it's very important to clarify the wildlife corridor regulations and establish standards for road and utility crossings when no other feasible option exists. The way the regulations are written right now, you probably cannot even go across there with a sanitary sewer line or a water line or something like that if you had to do that. So we want to make some provisions that allows us to do that. One option, of course, would be to make no changes, but it's not really a good idea simply from the standpoint we know we're going to have to do some type of a crossing in some of those corridors. Finally, on the 39th Avenue Southeast connector, and I think that the council has already identified some of their concerns with that when they were discussing the TIP, the staff's recommendation is to retain 39th Avenue as the primary connector there, but to do some things that might reduce the impact upon the development community, things like allowing them to transfer density from those public rights-of-way to other portions of the property, maybe identifying that the dedication of the lands is your primary contribution. You don't have to actually construct a roadway. Some of those kind of approaches in lieu of just kind of removing the 39th Avenue connector in total. Of course, certainly one of the alternatives would be for the council to say, look, we don't want to do the 39th Avenue connector. We want staff to go back and begin the process to basically look at alternative routes. And of course, one of the things that we're fortunate here is that there was a lot of analysis done on alternative routes, including one that would go along 35th Avenue and up to 39th here versus that. And that was alternative number 2 in the environmental impact statement. And basically start the process with our stakeholders about potentially changing those designations. Now that concludes my presentation, but I just kind of want to identify that tonight we're hoping the council can give us some feedback as to which direction they would like to go on these items, and then what that'll allow staff to do is to go back and craft some regulations that will be kind of taken to our stakeholders and some of the other folks who've been interested in this, so they can actually have something really concrete to look at. So with that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Have you received input from the citizens in that area, the property owners, rather?
Just in general, basically the concerns they relayed to us previously, as well as the concerns that the development community has provided.
Okay, I don't know if Mr. Phillips or Barry or do you have any comments on what was seen this evening? I haven't heard from you.
I haven't heard from them on this either. We didn't really actually, because this is so amorphous right now. I hate sending things that are kind of amorphous, that really don't have any definitive, something definitive for them to respond to. I think a better approach would be to get the council's check-in and say, yeah, this is a good approach. We'd like you to go that way, and then include them when we actually start creating code language, which is really where the rubber meets the road.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I slightly gave an opening for citizens to give input tonight because there were so many in the room that I think wanted to speak on this issue. It's not normally something that I do, but I would like to hear from at least a couple of the neighbors in this regard just to help get an initial kickoff and what their temperature is. So I wonder if Mr. Phillips would be willing to come forward and take a couple minutes to update us on where you are as neighbors.
Jim Phillips, 23223 39th Avenue Southeast. It's really not up to me to come back and tell the council or staff how to put the zoning on a piece of property. It's the developers that have come at us. We have been under contract so many times. They've come to the city, turned around, dropped the contract, moved on. They said, we can't deal with it. They just can't deal with it. So it's the developers that have to come forward and say, that works or that doesn't work. The one issue that really stands out is that from 39th Avenue east is a reasonable hillside, and there really isn't any critical areas up there, but we're being thrown into the critical area scenario from the west side of that 39th Avenue, which there is a lot of critical areas. I don't understand why at least the hillside area, which covers, I've forgotten now, 40 acres plus, why that can't utilize the underlying zoning code that the city uses throughout the rest of the city. I mean, with the regulations. The density issue is fine, but the regulations on that area, I mean, mine's all pasture land. And Tom Barry's 5 acres next to mine is all an apple orchard, and then Terry's property is all pasture land up in that area. So I don't understand why it's being thrown in, I guess, with the critical areas, but it's really the developers, and you people up here deal with the developers, and so does staff, and they're the ones that say it works or it doesn't work, and what's there now absolutely doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder, Mr. Vick, would you be willing to talk about your review of what was put forward tonight, or even the current code?
Sure, thank you. My name is Bob Vick. I'm with Sunquest Homes Phoenix Development at 16108 Ashway, Linwood, 98087. I think going back to 2005, we were trying to buy property up on the hill, and I think there were two major elements that caused us to withdraw. One was the Bothell Connector, which has really been I think it's really been an unfair handcuff on the property owners up on the hill to have that sit there as a burden on the land with those property owners that long. A developer is required to develop the frontage of any arterial that is sitting in front of the property. That's a given. We expect to do that, but here we've got this major 80-foot, whatever it is, now built to a different standard than a normal highway, and it basically, and it's two sides of the property. It runs right through the property, so that means you have both sides of it. So your frontage, you either develop the whole thing. It's so complicated to even try and figure that out. It's
it's a huge burden to even think about developing unless that Bothell connector is defined and funded in your 6-year plan. If you can't put it in your 6-year plan and fund it, you should pull it and get rid of it and take the burden off these folks. By the way, we don't have any current purchase offers on any of the property, so I'm not speaking out of any immediate interest on behalf of Sunquist. We were invited by staff to, as one of the developers, to get involved with a study on how to kind of look at this code. To give you some perspective, 20% effective impervious. In Snohomish County next door, the maximum impervious on a 5,000 square foot lot is 55%. So here we're at 20%, and the terminology is really interesting because I know Bruce and I talked about this a lot, and the reality is it translates to 35% somehow, but I don't really know how you get there. You know, it's kind of it's one of those, you need a decoder ring to understand how that all works. Not that Bruce wasn't speaking clearly. 50% forested coverage, the 4-lot short plat that you were talking about earlier, we looked at buying that project, and I don't want to misquote here, but one of the things that's interesting about the forested tree cover part of this is if there's no trees on the property, you still have to put the trees on the property. And that poor lady, she was an elderly lady that owns the property, she was going to be required to put 600 or 800 trees on these 4 lots. They were acreage lots, but think about that. That's a pretty heavy burden to put on a property owner. I've been participating in the Snohomish County process of trying to rewrite their tree ordinance. They have a pretty punitive tree ordinance right now that they realize is broken. In that, the studies have shown them, they produced aerial maps of the county, and the total canopy coverage is in the 30s for the city, or for the whole Snohomish County as a whole. So to put a burden of a 50% forested tree coverage on one small section of the city of Bothell seems a little bit ludicrous when the whole county is 30 to 38% in that range. Recognizing that there's a goal of protecting the fish in North Creek, and we're not setting that aside, but we're way uphill from that. We had trouble with the wildlife corridor as it was written, which I think Bruce has already addressed. We couldn't figure out how to get the roads and stuff through it. I think that there's you guys, at the end of the day, if you can't, you either throw it all out and start over. I hate to say that kind of stuff because it sounds like you made a horrible mistake, but it just doesn't work. For us, this translates with the 5400A, that's a gift, but it's also a penalty. Let me put it in perspective for you. If the only way I get to density as a developer is to make my footprint in my unit very small, what does that translate to in terms of value? Less value, right? I might get the same number of units, but I can't charge for it. If I can't charge for it, I can't pay the seller what his property is worth. Or by the codes that you've put on the property, you've greatly diminished this property owner's value. Now that's reality. So there are some things that on the back side of this code that Bruce hasn't gotten into.
Mr. Vick, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we're approaching our 9 o'clock deadline, so I would make a motion. You can stay up there and you can finish your remarks. I'm just going to make a motion to extend the meeting until 9:30.
Just a couple more comments. On the back side of the code, we spent quite a bit of time trying to understand it, and it works from if you are trying to save fish and you are trying to do the most you can to not impact any of the downstream flows. One of the backside of this, if you're able to get through the process and actually entitle a piece of property, is not being able to cut and make your benches in the property, build rockeries on your parcel to do that, to create pads for your property. The code implies that the planet Earth is to be left in sort of a gradual slope, and you're supposed to somehow get your footings and your foundations onto that slope. You guys, it's impractical. It does not work. So there's a lot of work on both sides of this code. I think staff's made a good effort to make it more palatable. I don't think the 40% is practical. I think you've got to get down into the 25 or 30%, which, by the way, is, again, 30% is on par with most of Snohomish County for the forested coverage. So thank you. I hope that helps.
Would you be willing to take a question? Sure. Great. Councilmember Sandberg.
Hi. You mentioned that there were two major elements that caused you to withdraw. The first one was the 39th connector, and I wasn't quite sure what the second element was.
Oh, I'm sorry. We tried to do various layouts with the combination of the 20% effective impervious, the 50% set aside for forested tree cover, and the net density calculation for the whole thing, and the math doesn't work. You can't. It works if the sellers of the property owners, decide they are going to take a whole lot less for their property. Yep.
Great. Thank you.
Right.
Okay. Moving on to council. Any questions for staff? Councilmember Evans.
Just a question. I didn't know if there were any other developers here who might speak to this, because I think it's the residents have been involved in this from day one, and we as a council have been. But to me, I think Mr. Phillips made the comment that, it's really the developers are the ones that have got to give us some input as to how this can work, as Mr. Vick just did, and still protect the environment and things. But that's critical to me to hear from the developers. So I don't know if there's any other developers here that could speak or not.
I don't see any of the other. Oh, there. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, good.
Ben Giddings with KLN Development. I'll be very brief. I share what Bob Vick's gone through. We've also had the properties under contract, went through the same motions that Bob went through and came up with the same results. I'm a little more vested right now because we have a large project right next door in the county that we're developing. So we've been actively working with the whole neighborhood group to try and come up with some solutions to it and some density that makes their property valuable enough for a developer to move forward with it. So I don't think I have anything in addition to that to add.
Councilmember Sandberg has a question for you, if you wouldn't mind.
Oh, of course.
Thank you. I forgot to ask this of Mr. Vick. So it seems like uncertainty is a prevalent theme here, and I was wondering if the 39th connector, if that was removed from the capital facilities plan, so there was no expectation to build the 39th connector, how significant of an impact would that have on your level of uncertainty?
From my standpoint, the connector is less of a concern because we're mostly focused on the dry areas of property to the east. The biggest concern that we came up with was just that with the code as written, the density is so minimized that you can't pay really what a fair value for the property is. So the 39th is important, but I'd be more focused on the clearing limits, the impervious limits, the density limits. The rockery and grading limits also have a big impact. So I think it's more of a density is my primary concern, less the 39th corridor. I'll let Bob answer his end of that one.
Thank you.
Councilmember Evans.
So I don't know if you've had a chance to, hopefully you were able to see the staff presentation and some of the things that they're recommending, some proposed changes and things. And Mr. Vick addressed some of those that maybe those just aren't going far enough. Forest cover is a good example. So is that your feeling that it's still going to be difficult even with these potential changes to get this thing done?
I don't think the changes go quite far enough. Now, it's hard when you start talking about percent. It's 40%. You have to talk about 40% of what, and that of what might be manipulated enough that you could get to where you want to go. But from first blush, I don't think it's quite far enough. If you maybe it's gone 25% of the way to where you need to go. I think you could add some flexibility to it to focus a little bit more on identifying where the primary sensitive areas are, and that would allow maybe some different regulations to be applied to the dry upland areas. I think there really are two distinctly different areas in that sub-basin, and if you split them apart and maybe come up with a little bit more targeted regulations, you might be able to get a little bit further along.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I want to know what your two best offers would be to these citizens sitting right here. Let's put it on the table with both of you in the room. No? All right. Thank you, guys. Council, do you have further questions for staff?
I have a couple.
Sure. Councilmember Lamb?
Bill, can you tell us originally when this was done, and I know we've had the Nick Fuchapa area, was that designated solely because it was the Fitzgerald 35th sub-area? I mean, does one completely consume the other?
Well, I'll probably reach a point where I'll have to defer to Bruce. But the Nick Fuchapa area actually extends beyond Fitzgerald into our potential annexation area. So it wasn't specific to Fitzgerald. It applied to this area that had been identified as being of very, very high habitat value.
Okay. So it encompasses all of the 35th Fitzgerald sub-area, but that it includes areas that are unincorporated currently in the county that we think are also of sort of ecological importance.
I don't think it's all of Fitzgerald, because that would go across Fitzgerald Road, and there's some upland areas that aren't included. But it's certainly most of Fitzgerald, and it extends on the comp plan into areas that we haven't yet annexed.
And am I right that the study suggests that you could, in terms of the impervious surface requirements, that you could eliminate that, and that the rest of our code currently would take over and would adequately address the issue of impervious surface? Is that what staff's recommendation, or staff is saying could happen if council wanted to go that way?
We are proposing to still retain the impervious surface requirement to lower that, to make it less severe.
Okay. And as an alternative approach, and maybe I'm conflating two of the items, but I thought as an alternative approach, you were saying that you could not on the, and I'm missing where this is, that on on the impervious surface requirements, that one of the issues was that you could reduce it dramatically, but, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to get to where I am in my notes. It says the alternative would be remove all language regarding impervious surface area limitations and rely on the forest retention standards and the mandatory use of LID facilities to protect the surface water and groundwater. Given the advancements to the Bothell Stormwater Manual since 2007, the new standards the Department of Ecology will be issuing in 2016, and the forest retention requirements, a viable option might be to remove the requirement for limiting effective impervious surface. This alternative would only be effective if the city retains a relatively high forest cover retention and the LID overlay regulations implement the latest version of the Bothell stormwater. I guess my question would be have you had an interface with the development community about which of those two, whether that would be beneficial to them or whether they would prefer to reduce, to keep it to lower it, but to have the forest cover reduced in some way as well?
Well, I think what we've heard is that both of those conditions are problematic for the development community. The conundrum we face is that we remember thinking way back, this used to be growth reserve, R40,000 for the whole area, and the reason that it had that designation and implementing zoning was because of the quality of the habitat. We heard back then that it was so severely restricting development potential that a different approach was warranted, and that's why we came back with the approach that involved applying an R5400A zone, which is actually 8 units per acre, attached or detached, but with some protective mechanisms to make sure that quality habitat was maintained. So it was kind of a bold experiment back in the 2006 or whenever we did this, and it was science-based. Frankly, back then we hoped that the offset of allowing significantly increased density, but protecting the area through forest cover requirements and impervious surface requirements could sort of meet in the middle and allow more development potential. We've had 8 years of experience now. There has been a lot of interest by developers. We've talked to lots of developers. We're convinced that this bold experiment doesn't really cut it. It's not really achieving what we wanted it to achieve.
So one follow-up question, and my final question would be then, I know that was based and that those regulations were based on scientific assessments of that area at that time. Is there any sense that the habitat and the quality of that may have changed in the intervening decade, such that it would result in a different determination?
No, we don't think so. We don't think that the quality of the habitat has diminished. One significant change that has happened, though, is the growth and refinement of stormwater regulations. And one of the points that Bruce made is that they're stricter now than they used to be, and they're going to get even stricter. So it's possible that those regulations could take the place of a lot of the things that are in the special zoning now.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other council members? Councilmember Rayam?
Mr. Blackburn, so in here it says the current stormwater design manual. Is that the one that I wrote?
It is.
Have you guys updated it since then?
There have been a few amendments, yes.
Has the LID requirements been amended that after we wrote it? Because we were rather bold, I would say, when that was written.
I don't believe they have been changed. I think they're still in place, yes.
Okay. The other issue that, so in writing that manual, I experienced probably what the developers experienced about the disconnection between the citywide regulations for stormwater management and the requirements in this sub-area. And it seems to me that the current design standards basically don't meet the current best available science for what we now think is required for low impact development. And the new manual, which was issued in 2012 and will be required to adopt per our municipal stormwater permit at the end of 2016, does have what the state has found to be the best available science, what we need to do for basically controlling the flows when the rain falls, it flows across the landscape. And there's the LID standards in the current manual are different than the old ones. They're more restrictive than the current standards. And I wonder, how would we deal with that? So let's say we roll back these standards now, and we go back basically, because these are more extensive than the 2005 requirements. We roll them back, and then in 2016, all of a sudden, they come back again. So it seems a bit disconnected, and I wonder have you guys talked to the stormwater engineers to see what about applying the current standards in the current manual and the current permit, the 2012 manual and the current stormwater permit in this area now, and take out the LID overlay?
That's an option. That's certainly an option. And one of the things when I talked about the surface water folks, they were a little bit nervous about doing that because who knows what's going to happen between now and 2016. But certainly the idea is that in our minds, 2016 is just around the corner because we're going to have to be doing this activity in 2015. But that is one of the features that we could potentially do.
Because the permit was appealed, and it was ruled upon that those LID standards will hold, and cities will adopt those requirements by the end of 2016. So that all the chips are in place essentially. That is a certain endpoint. I think in there too, it does speak to impervious coverage areas and forested areas in the new manual, and I think it did in the old manual. It would be interesting to have that come back to look at. You basically can get out of doing stormwater. So just to take a real quick step back, a forest is a whole lot better than engineers trying to mimic a forest. So there is existing regulations in place where if you retain enough forest, you don't have to build stormwater facilities. And I don't know what those numbers are. I don't recall them off the top of my head. Is it a big number?
It's a big number, yeah. It's more than half the property.
So that's not going to help anything here.
I can verify that for you. I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but I know when I was talking to one of our surface water staff, they said, yeah, it's a big number. So,
well, there's dispersion ask them about that too, because if you can disperse the flows into a vegetated area, it doesn't have to be forest. That also could help the circumstance. So yeah, I fully understand why the current regulations are not really germane to the existing regulations citywide. And I think it is time to probably look at that. The requirements in this sub area were written before all of those requirements, and especially the new requirements that are coming down. And I would just caution that it would be unfortunate if we take a step back and then we have to take 2 steps forward again. So I'd rather just if we know where we're going to go, and in 2016 we're going to go there, why don't we just do that here instead of moving back and forth over the next 2 years? Again, I think rolling back the impervious area or increasing the amount of impervious, I think, is manageable as long as you do the stormwater management requirements. But the forested area, if there's something we can do to retain that, I think that in itself is probably the gem of this package of requirements in this area. Again, we try to mimic nature, and quite frankly, we almost fail every time. So that's all I have to say for now.
Is this just questions of staff, or are we doing deliberation?
Staff.
Okay, but
we'll
we'll be
deliberate
doing
after
okay.
a motion's made, which won't be actually tonight. It's just a study session.
We're not making motions.
No motions. This is just a study session. This will come back. So this is your chance to ask questions of staff.
Well, I don't have questions of staff because I talked with Bruce earlier today, but I do have some comments during our deliberative phase, if we're going to deliberate.
Please continue to ask questions, by all means. I have a question, if I could just jump in right in front of you. What is the current forest cover? Do we know the percentage?
Citywide regulations or
no, here in this area, do we have any idea?
When we measured it back in 2006, it was about 47% at that time. I don't think it's changed a lot in the city portion. However, in the Snohomish County portion, it has been reduced.
Wow.
In the Snohomish County, where they've done a lot of development, there's been
Mr. Mayor, would you yield for a follow-up question? So onto that, how much of that is in area that is completely unbuildable, like inside a buffer? I mean, because there's a significant amount of forest cover that's right next to the stream that isn't. I'm just wondering, in the built environment of land that's eligible to be built, what is on the ground right now, the forest
And
cover?
I'm sorry I can't recall that exact number off the top of my head. I know we analyzed it. It was not as much as you thought. There was a significant portion of the forest area that was within either critical areas or critical area buffers.
I'd love to know that when this comes back.
Okay.
Yeah. Councilmember Sandberg.
Okay, so I'll just make some comments. For me, the key concept is what is stated in or an overarching principle is what Bruce has stated in the staff report, which is, quote, the Fitzgerald 35th Southeast Subarea contains the highest quality fish and wildlife habitat within the city. And that's why we originally went through all this process, as Bill explained, changing from R40,000 to these different regulations. And in the sub-area encompasses a watershed. So whether you're right up against the creek or you're upland from the river, or from the creek, you're still part of the watershed, and that impacts the watershed. And so I don't think it's in the best interest of this highest quality fish and wildlife habitat to split the two areas, uplands versus lowlands. And when there's a really interesting picture in our agenda packet. I don't know if you have one of the aerial photos, but you can see the quality of the sub area within the city limits, and then right when you go north of the city limits, there's that really dense development, and then immediately to the east of it, there's a development as well that's treed, and so it's really a stark contrast. I'm looking at page 261 of our agenda packet if anybody is interested. And so that goes to my concern about really putting a lot of effort and thought onto the tree retention part of this ordinance. And, you know, I understand some of the concerns that we don't want to require somebody to plant 800 trees per acre when their property isn't already forested. But it seems to me there should be some reasonable balance that we can arrive at. And if that means simplifying the language and making it more clear to achieve that same thing versus requiring 800 trees to be planted, I think that we should do that, because you also say in your staff report that and you mentioned this as well, is that the number one characteristic that provides for the ecology in the area is the forest cover. So I want us to be very careful in changing that. So on page 257, you ask for council consideration and direction on several issues. Sure, simplifying the overlay language to utilize more layperson-friendly terms is a great idea. I agree with allowing surface water facilities to be credited towards lot and dwelling unit yield, because if we don't, it becomes a disincentive, because surface water facilities in low-impact developments tend to be larger, and so it makes sense to credit that towards dwelling unit. The clarifying the wildlife regulation and creating standards when no feasible option exists, I support that. We haven't really talked about the 39th Avenue corridor, and that's why I asked the question, because when I was reading through this, I saw that theme of uncertainty, and I think a big source of uncertainty is having to contribute to a $70 million, and that's a 10-year-old figure, a $70 million connector. And if we were to remove that from the TIP list, I would think that would remove a lot of uncertainty and cost for development in that area. So I think we should have that conversation up here, because the staff report, you recommend retaining 39th Avenue as a preferred alignment. And then, again, with that conversation is if we remove it, then they don't even, there's no right-of-way that they have to dedicate. That is buildable land space that they can dedicate to lots, buildable lots, if we truly are going to abandon that option. But if we are going to abandon that option, then we need to have some kind of road plan that's going to service the development that may occur in that area. And when I asked you today, how many homes were we talking about? You were talking potentially 500, not in the thousands, but in the hundreds. And so if we're going to abandon the 39th connector, we need to have a road plan in place. And that might be, using 35th as the arterial. I don't really know the topography that well to know about the extension of 236th eastward, but I think I would like us to consider those options, and so that brings me to the forest language regulation about reducing the amount of forest land. I really want us to be really careful about doing that, and if you can draft regulations that address the concerns that we've heard tonight, but still maintain that forest cover, I think that does a lot for the watershed. And then could you put up the slide where you talk about the alternative for the effective impervious area? You said basically you could jettison the effective, remove all language, the alternative. Remove all language regarding effective impervious surface areas, and then rely on the forest retention standards. Well, if we reduce the forest retention standards, then we're having like a double hammer if we go that alternative. So I don't know if it sounded to me like you were in support of this alternative.
Who's you?
Councilmember Rayum, sorry. That Councilmember Rayum was in favor of this alternative in terms of using surface water manual standards, whether it's the
2005 or the 2012 standards, and keep forest retention standards, and then you can remove the effective impervious surface area limitation. So does that's sort of, I'm just working off the bullet points that Bruce has asked in his staff report to give direction on.
Yeah, thank you. I think the reality is we're not probably going to get to great full council direction this evening at 9:21.
Okay, well.
But we can try to do our best. Do you have any comments?
I have a couple of. Did you want to? No, you can go ahead. So there were two. I guess I have like about 6 comments. I'll try and get through really very briefly. One thing for me is the entire forest cover regulation, I think, has to be based in reality of what is currently there, what is currently in buffers, and what is actually on the land on people's property. How much of that land is forest? I think you have to. The abstract notion of forest reduction, if a particular piece of property isn't currently forested and isn't taking away from the forested cover, I think we need to reflect that in our regulations, and I don't think we do at present. As to the issue of the 39th connector, right now my understanding is we don't have any money pledged from Snohomish County for this project. We don't have any money from the federal government, and we don't have any money from the state government. And the price tag from our TIP for this connector is $80 million currently. That's the estimate for this project. Given the transportation needs that we have in our community, I can't see keeping this on there, because I think it has been a burden on this area. I think it has been something that has not, right now the funding is such that we're never going to spend. If we had $80 million to spend on transportation, I don't think anybody up here would argue it would be best spent building a road between, connecting 39th. I think that, for a fraction of that, we could mitigate around the other ones. And so I actually do support, and I'll be advocating for that in the capital facilities plan, completely removing that designation, simply because it's been on there for too long, and the price tag is astronomical, and we have absolutely no support from neighboring jurisdictions to continue that. With respect to the impervious surface requirements and the rockery grading limits, I think we really need to go back and look at how, practically speaking, people look at these at this issue. What a developer is looking at is how many homes they're going to be able to build. Honestly, I consider myself to be not a smart person, but not a dumb person either, and it is a Rubik's Cube to try to figure that out with our current regulations in here. And I appreciate that it was probably well-intentioned when passed, but I think our community development director, who I have enormous respect for, said it best, it hasn't worked. And I think we need to focus on what is there currently, what are the current conditions of the land. And I'm not convinced necessarily that the habitat hasn't been degraded over time. When we did these regulations, 39th Avenue to the north looked completely different than it does today. It's completely built out. And so I would be interested to see if the habitat, if the salmon, if everything else is identical to what it was over a decade ago. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would be surprised to see that. I want to see a reality-based approach that doesn't take families and people's interests sort of hostage to a higher ideal. I mean, we all support salmon. We all like to see our stormwater preserved, but there's no reason that, a single area of our city should bear the entire burden of our city's regulations uncompensated and sort of be a guinea pig for this going forward. So I really think that it's insufficient to simply say, well, we'll try to nip and tuck here and try to make it. I think we really have to look at this with extremely fresh eyes and look at the reality, what is there currently environmentally, and really make sure that when we're regulating something, we're talking about what's really there, not what we would like to be there or what some future stormwater manual would require us to put there.
Councilmember Agnew?
I'd move that we extend the meeting to 10 o'clock.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Who's next? Who would like to ask questions? Councilmember Evans.
Well, I have lived in this neighborhood since 1985. And I honestly don't recall. The reason I got involved in this, in council meetings and things, was because of the actions that was pending on this particular area. But I honestly don't recall any public notices that came out to the neighborhood or any involvement on determining the analysis of this area as a Nifachapa area. I don't know if we had public meetings on that or not. I don't know where I was, but I never saw any of that. So the horse was already out of the barn because that was established, and, you know, we were stuck with that. So then came along the LID standards and the road, the Bothell connector, and all those things. So the neighborhood was trying to catch up with all this, but we were already up against the wall as far as what had happened in this area. And the frustration to me at that point in time was I looked to the south of me and I saw Pinnacle Sonata with what, 250 units there or something? Aren't they in this area? And now I look to the north of me, and you've mentioned there's several lots and things up there that's been developed. It would be interesting to know what the impact has been on the stream based on the past when we looked at this and today. Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? I mean, there's been impacts on the area, and the concern is we've taken an area there, 40, 50 acres, and we've applied these additional requirements there because of this study and these conditions that we found there. So we really handicapped that area or encumbered that area with a significant impact that we don't have on either side of us. For whatever reason, I don't know why those other areas weren't considered, or what's being considered all up and down the North Creek corridor, but this area has really been impacted by what we've done here. What I've heard tonight from the developers, who are certainly much more knowledgeable on how to do this than I am, what's before us tonight has even been proposed by staff is not going to work. I don't see things changing for those residents up there in that area who have encumbered this requirement for the last 10 years or so. So my concern is, I agree. I think we do need to take a hard look at this. I can tell you that what brought a lot of this about, and I think most of the council members were here except Andy, but I think Tris was here during that time, was we were looking at the Bothell connector and the impact of that road on that neighborhood. So we said, okay, let's give these neighbors some consideration and let's rezone that area to R5400A, which we did, thinking that would lessen the impact on the road and they would be able to do something. Nothing's happened. The road isn't going to happen. When I moved in there in 1985, I think I have the original study that was done saying, here's the road, let's build it. Nothing's happened. I think we need to eliminate the road from our comprehensive plan. I understand we need a transportation access for that neighborhood or for that area, but the Bothell connector is not the one. It's just it's too expensive, too encumbering, and we don't have the finances to do that. My concern is, another concern I have, and I had questions, but I guess we were kind of just deliberating a little bit here, is that all of these things that we're talking about, or potential changes, aren't going to happen overnight. And so this neighborhood could sit there again for another 2 years, 3 years, without any potential interest from property owners, because we can't, we can't get the answers, or we can't get this down to what we think the developers will work with the neighbors to purchase that property. So whatever we do, I hope we can move it along as quickly as possible, because these folks have been encumbered with, and I can tell, for quite some time. And I can tell you that there have been properties that go up for sale, or are currently up for sale, that have lost potential buyers because of the Bothell connector. People, and I've actually had phone calls. Well, what's going to happen with the Bothell connector? I said, it's been on the books for a long time. We don't have any money. I don't think it's going to happen. But the comment was, well, we're just not sure. We're scared off by that issue, so we're going to back away from purchasing this property because that's hanging over our heads and we don't know. So the forest cover, the idea of taking the upper area and looking at that differently than the lower area, whatever the case may be, I think we seriously have to look at this. And as Councilmember Lamb said, we're all in favor of protecting the salmon. We love salmon and our streams and our habitat and things. But the fact is, we have an Urban Growth Management Act that says the density is supposed to be concentrated in this urban area. We are an urban area, and we need to do what we can to protect our environment, but at the same time, we need to get the area improved and provide the housing. So I don't have the answers. I think we've had some good comments here tonight from the developers. I don't think we're going far enough with what's been proposed by staff, so I would hope that staff would take a hard look at this, come back to us as early as possible in September, say, here's another run at this thing. I'd bounce it off of the developers before, even come back to us and say, are we getting close? Are there things we can do? And we certainly want to protect what we can, but what are we protecting that hasn't already been impacted by development and is and continually being impacted by additional development around it? So I appreciate the staff. I know it's been a challenge for them, but I'm in favor of removing the roadway from there and looking at the rest of this. I don't think we're there yet, so I think we need to continue to work on it and come back.
Deputy Mayor Spivey?
Well, I think everybody knows where I stand on the connector. It's time to, I've been saying it for a long time, it's time to get rid of it. The money's not there. Nobody's going to partner with us on it. So I think there's ways to move traffic, not the most ideal way, but in a pretty efficient manner. So I look forward to those discussions on how we do that. I agree that we're asking a lot through the current code to a lot of this area to bear the brunt of maintaining North Creek and its watershed, but that creek travels a lot of areas, and Snohomish County hasn't done their part to maintain that creek, which is very disappointing. They could have instituted some things to help that out, but there is a happy medium in there, and I don't know that we're there yet. So I definitely want to see staff come back with some options. Tree retention, I get retaining trees that are there, but some of the requirements to establish large numbers become problematic. And we got to be able to have codes that allow you to actually to build the building. I mean, if we can't do things, move earth to build a building, then what's the point of doing all the other stuff? So we got to be able to, build the buildings, but still do what we can to make things right for that area as far as that balance of cool water for the creek and maintaining that watershed. Again, we're not there yet, but I think we can get there. And we wouldn't even talk about soil amendments and things like that were, long discussions, I remember. And so I think we can look at this. I'd like to be able to see this thing done holistically in nice, plain language that anybody can pick it up and understand. So I look forward to what you have coming back.
You got through without mentioning roundabouts on both ends of 35th.
Well, I have mentioned it plenty of times. I didn't think I needed to, but thank you for bringing it
I
up.
was waiting in bated anticipation. Do you have any comments, Councilmember Agnew? No. So I take two perspectives on this. If we want 39th connector, then we need to make zoning in order to make it happen. Any developer would come and say that makes a lot of sense, or we remove it. So I'm certainly in favor of currently removing the designation as it is as the start of the conversation. I don't think tonight we're going to get through all of the bullet points on here and have direction, but my hope is next time as we come to hopefully the first meeting in September, city manager, that we can maybe have an hour and a half or so for this so we can substantially get through what needs to happen. And so by the end of that meeting, we know pretty clearly what direction we've taken as a council and as a city. So that's my hope. So hopefully council can take home the agenda packet. It's in your computer. You take it with you everywhere. If it's like me, I have it in paper form, so I'll take this with me tonight. But at this point, I would just suggest that we come back in September, having read this further, taken further consideration, and be prepared as a council to take steps forward. Cool? All right, that brings us to the end of that agenda item and the end of what is currently scheduled, except for Councilmember Rayam wished to make a motion considering city, or actually reconsidering City Hall. Would you like to push your motion forward?
I had a second. Do we want to go through that process again? It was a
Yeah,
motion
if you
to,
could. I can guess who your second was. I didn't hear it, but
Okay. So it's not a motion to reconsider, but it's a motion to rescind the decision made on June 3rd, 2014 to move forward the construction of City Hall.
And I seconded that. If maybe we just want to wait a moment for the room to clear.
yeah. So motion to reconsider? No, say it again. Rescind.
Rescind.
Okay.
I'd like to speak to the motion.
Yeah, please.
So since June 3rd, on June 3rd, I had my issues already detailed out and why I was not in support of the City Hall. But I have since received substantial information from not only people within the city of Bothell that are involved in paying attention, but also I've reached out to other professionals in the industry to find out that, in fact, this memo that was dated May 30th, and we got it on June 3rd, from Public-Private Development Solutions, it really was the first time we saw that the estimated square footage price for a private developer to build the same project was $76.20, which is even more dumbfounding apparently too, because I'm not a commercial realtor. I don't understand, or I have a lot more understanding now, probably more than anybody else on the dais here, about commercial real estate. I've spent hours trying to research this. But basically what this memo did was, this was the proof that we had that we were getting a fair deal. And I looked at this memo, and one of the things that came to mind is that I could plug in $100 million into this memo for the price of this project, and quite frankly, it just come out the same, that, hey, you're getting a good deal. And that was concerning to me. And so I've done quite a bit of research. I even drug out the boxes of archived information from what happened in the city of Redmond 10 years ago. And just the comparison of the detail of the document, there's some 40-odd pages of information that they went through. I talked to the broker that did this opinion, and I told him the price that we're paying per square foot, and he gasped, and he said, that's more than the high rent district in downtown San Francisco. That's more than downtown New York retail space. That's more, that he said that's just off the charts, basically. And, I have a lot of concern about this. I think it's just outrageously priced. $1,000 a square foot to build the project is a whole other number we could talk about. It's more than the UW Bothell project for the new science building, and that includes Slate laboratories, 11 of them for students, and this is an office space, with some public amenities added to it. In contrast, the city of Redmond project, and it was the cost per square foot per year is a 6320 financing option, just like ours. They were paying $24.50 a square foot, and it included a whole lot more parking, a whole lot more amenities in the surrounding property to provide public areas. So I've worked with Mr. Moritz on this, and I've worked with other people in the community, and it's really been interesting because it's the first time it's really a bipartisan discussion and it came very apparent to me that we've made a huge mistake, and I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to do something about it, and that's why I made this motion. The other piece I do want to mention too is that in our protocol manual, I had to alert you guys before I go to third parties. And this is my, it's not a threat, but I just want you to know that I do intend to I plan to call the Attorney General tomorrow and the press, because this thing to me is so outlandishly priced that I just can't. I'm not doing my fiduciary responsibilities to the citizens without making sure everything possible is done to try to stop this thing before the bonds are executed. In summary, and
Just for clarification, are you suggesting you'll take legal action or no?
No.
Okay.
I'm hoping that that there's safeguards in place. I mean, there's an RCW in place that's extremely explicit that if it's legal or not, and we had our bond counsel weigh in on that. And the reality is, read it. Read what it says. It says, don't rent space with public funds more than the comparable rental rates. That's not a legal issue. That's a smart, important RCW that makes sense. And this is the same thing. Like this is the type of stuff that makes people hate government. You go out and you spend $1,000 a square foot to build something, and they go and they look at, well, how much was it to build my house, or how much was it to remodel my kitchen, or how much was it to do this, and they look at what we paid, and it's infuriating for people. And I think we need to do something about this. And the purpose to rescind it isn't to just kill the project. It's just take a moment, get a third party that's not involved with this development process, is not involved with this private public development solutions outfit, which doesn't even have a business license. I mean, we went so far as to drive by these addresses where this guy is claimed to have a business. He doesn't have a business license in any of the cities that he's worked in. It's just heart-wrenching to know that really was the big pinnacle piece of information we got to tell us whether or not we got a good deal or not. And this guy's never came to council. In his scope of work, he's supposed to keep us abreast of the information.
Just to quickly clarify he actually sat in our or in our conference room a couple times here.
Bill Engel did?
Absolutely. I encourage you to know the consultants that we have working for the city. If you didn't know me, he sat here, and we've all met him before.
Oh, I've never met him.
Okay.
You've seen him.
So anyways, I think let's see, make sure I got all my pieces here. I think it's really concerning too that we got that information on the dais the night of the meeting. I also think it's really upsetting to find, $6 million. I'd like to know how long the city knew about the $6 million finance charge that was tacked on at the last meeting, because that's really played a huge role in the $53 million cost. So I just hope that we just take the opportunity before the bonds are sold to have a study done, to look at this thing and make sure that we're getting a good deal for the public.
So I'll speak just for a little bit. Mr. Engel had been part of the process, and we've taken tours with him. I think, Tris, you were on that tour at one point, too. You can recall or not, but several of us went around. I've met Bill Engel several times, saw him here in our council chambers. So he definitely was part of the process. He was not a ghost and not here to answer questions. Our legal consultant was here as well, who's extremely well respected, not just here locally, but I believe used for bond issues in the state, and others can chip on in that as well. So as far as the legal matters, from my not just understanding, by involvement in the process, I think those have been covered. So the science building has been brought up, and it is definitely a different building. There are 11 different classrooms in there, and I was at the opening of that science building. It was great to be able to walk around, meet the chancellor, and get a tour of the building. It's gorgeous, and it's going to serve our citizens, student activists and such in our city very well, and our community even further beyond just Bothel's regions and out. There are some significant change or differences between our building and theirs. They don't have any parking included. The design fees, I don't believe, were a part of that cost. I don't know for sure. Front-end improvements aren't involved in that building. There are several differences. There are costs in doing frontage improvements for City Hall. There's costs in the underground parking that we are doing. And then ultimately, it's not just the building that we are building. It is a public park, a public amenity. It's the civic square that we've been talking about for a very long time, where citizens are going to come gather and be together. So those are all costs that are part of our city hall. So there's been comparisons of saying it's $1,000 per square foot. That includes a lot of different fees. I would never say it costs me, I'll throw out a number, $1 a square foot for a house if the cost for the vertical construction of the house was really 40 cents or something to that extent. So we're kind of mixing cost all within this, saying it costs $1,000 per square foot to build. There's design fees that go in, there's mitigation fees that go in, there's improvements to the surrounding area that have to occur. So I just want to make sure that we're clear. There was a comparison made that, people doing remodels in their kitchens. This is drastically different from a remodel in the kitchen. This is a complex civic building that has costs of payment included for the duration of the building. And the big difference is from a standard lease, like if I were to go out, which I do, I used to have a real estate license. I was a commercial realtor for years. I would help people lease buildings, right? And so I would get them into a lease for $25 or $35 a square foot, whatever it may be. And their term is 5 years to 7 years. And they have triple net on top of that. Sometimes it's $5 a square foot, sometimes it's $9 a square foot. So ultimately you're paying $45 a square foot or somewhere thereabouts for commercial space in maybe the Bothell area or Redmond, wherever it may be. I primarily worked out of Everett and South. So I'm a little bit different in that regards. But at the end of their 5 to 7 year term, they didn't own the building. That's what's significantly different here as well. So something to take into consideration. We can't say that, we should just be paying current market fee of $25 a square foot like it's a standard lease. It's not. It's quite different. So in regards to the RCW, my hopes is our city attorney can potentially jump into this conversation and make comment on it as well, just to bring some clarity to it. I am concerned that you're alerting third parties. You're allowed to do so. Thank you for letting us know that you're going to do that. We've already responded to the Attorney General as well, and so we look forward to that conversation. Other council members that wish, City Manager, you want to jump in?
Yeah, just real quickly, I think there's a lot of noise, a lot of discussion about a rental lease compared against a method of financing that we chose to utilize to build the building of which we will own.
Right.
We wouldn't likely be having this discussions if we simply decided not to do a 6320. We were just going to issue the debt on our own. We have debt service based on this $46.7 million price tag. That same debt service would still be there. We wouldn't call it a lease. We would just call it our annual debt service payment against the bonds that we issued. So again, a lot of noise, a lot of comparison to a rental lease, which is totally inaccurate from what we're performing. Remember, we decided to go with a 6320 because of the literature and the evidence that suggested we'd get a superior product for less cost. That forced us into then utilizing a nonprofit facilitating entity that would issue bonds on our behalf. We would then provide a lease agreement with that nonprofit entity, of which, after the bonds have been fully paid for, we would own the building, no strings attached. There also seems to be a lot of confusion about the capitalized interest and how that is a mechanism that will benefit us versus a typical traditional sort of straight over tackle debt service in which we would have to pay interest on the money as we draw down on those bonds to build that facility. It's not really any different than what we're proposing with the 6320 lease. And so I'd ask Tammy to share a little bit more information about the bond rating that we anticipate and the likelihood of some of that capitalized interest coming back to us.
Okay. I will say one other thing that has to do with rent. And that has to do with when you own a property for 30 years, rent is not, per square foot, is not a straight line calculation. Okay, it goes up over the 30 years. You don't pay for the building at the same price over, that is a mortgage, which is what we're doing. So anyway, calculate or capitalize interest. Let me try this one more time, okay? I sent out, or I provided information for the city manager to send out that basically did a reconciliation for the council from the financing cost of the building, overall financing cost, to the GMP. Okay, it's a pretty. Anyway, basically the financing cost of the building is actually. For the city, it's $94 million. over the life of the building. That's how you have to look at it. You can't look at it just for those first few years. The capitalized interest is literally the last two payments made on a 30-year mortgage. It just happens that the nonprofit, which is the way that we chose to go through the 6320 because of the massive financial benefits of going that way, 10% is not outrageous for over contract costs on a project of this size. So you would be looking at $5 million. We chose to go with the 6320 because it assured us that we would pay approximately $500,000 for the nonprofit, their part in it. But it made sure that we didn't pay the other $4.5 million. And that's just if there's a 10% overage. If you've seen, I think we all remember what happened in Bellevue with their city hall. So capitalized interest, all they're doing is they are fronting interest from the back end to the front end because the 6320 nonprofit has no money to make those first two bond payments. So instead of, we do not take ownership of the property until we actually are in the building. So the first two payments on the 30-year mortgage are paid by the nonprofit because at that point they own the building. So that's why they're going out, they're getting the bonding. They take on that risk for those 2 years, which is, it's a big risk that they're taking. So they make the first two payments with interest that is literally where they're fronting us the interest on the building. So we're not paying those last two payments. The nonprofit pays them up front. So the only difference in cost, in overall cost, to the city has nothing to do with that. It's $7 million, actually, the difference, because it's two payments of $3.5 million is what that $7 million is. So the only change in the cost of a 30-year mortgage, if we paid for it, we wouldn't be paying interest on interest. Okay, during that development period, during that real high risk period of time, and when the we're looking at materials going up or whatever, and we're secured through that 6320, they are going to be making that payment. Therefore, we're paying interest on that interest. Am I making sense?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Councilmember Lamb.
So, to me, this is pretty straightforward and simple, and I'm not sure that there's any new information that we've had since when we took this vote. A lease payment, whether you lease a car, for example, is generally less than a payment if you're going to buy a car. To rent a home is cheaper than it is to buy a home in terms of monthly payments. Comparing a lease payment on a car to what you would pay if you were going to buy a car is smart if you're deciding whether to lease or buy a car. We made a decision as a city that we weren't going to lease office space. We received an email last week, and I appreciate Councilman Rayum's candor of saying that he was working with Mr. Moritz, because that's extremely helpful and enlightening. The letter said in no uncertain terms that this issuance is illegal, that this financial scheme is illegal, and that it's in contravention of state law. We have, on the exact issue that's being raised, the opinion of Hugh Spitzer and Foster Pepper, which in 2011 was ranked as the premier municipal finance law firm in the city of Seattle. And the comment was made a moment ago, well, it's not really a legal issue, it just has to do with the law. Well, it is a legal issue. And we're fortunate that we do have a third party who Mr. Moritz had commented that we paid good money to or paid too much to. We do pay good money to our bond counsel to make sure that their opinions are correct. They are backed by malpractice insurance. They are backed by their reputation. Mr. Spitzer has spent more than 30 years in municipal finance. He looked at the exact issue that's being raised and came to the completely opposite conclusion that's being advanced by Mr. Moritz and Councilmember Rayum. That, if it were illegal, that would be a huge issue. And that's why I wrote back to Mr. Moritz when he wrote me, and I said, please tell me who you're talking to. Who is the municipal finance attorney that has come to this startling conclusion that we're about to issue a bunch of bonds on an illegal transaction? Who has told you that Mr. Spitzer has committed professional malpractice, one of the most respected attorneys in Washington State? The response that I got was crickets. There was no response. I offered Mr. Moritz again an opportunity. Who have you consulted with? What municipal finance attorney is coming up with this opinion? I even offered him the opportunity to say, who would you suggest that we talk to? Who is an attorney who has some background in municipal finance who would support the conclusion that you've come to? And there was nothing. There isn't anything. Again, there's nothing new that has come up tonight. I'm troubled that somebody who has come to our council meetings, a consultant, has now had apparently his home driven by, his divorce has been referenced in a pleadings. I think that says a lot about the people looking at Mr. Engel and says very little about Mr. Engel, who has worked with some of the most respected institutions in Washington State on these transactions many, many times. This is really again, if this were an illegal transaction, I would be the first person to say, please stop, let's reevaluate this. There is nothing in the record to support that contention, and there is the absolute sterling reputation of Foster Pepper. There is the opinion of the most respected bond counsel I know, who the state of Washington uses as their bond counsel, saying that that contention is 100% wrong. It doesn't get any more secure than that. You can't get another opinion. And when I asked, I said, is there another law firm you want to get a secondary opinion from? The response was utter silence. This is people who were free to disagree on issues of the city council. I understand that the two of you voted no. I understand that you wish we had gone in a different direction. That doesn't change the facts as they were on that night, and the facts haven't changed tonight.
Councilmember Evans, Spivey, or Agnew? You haven't actually spoken to the underlying motion. Actually, if you would like to speak longer than 3 minutes.
Move to extend the meeting to 10:30.
How about 10:15?
Move to extend to 10:15.
Let's place an electronic vote this time. If clerk can display. Passes 6-1 with Councilman Lamb in the negative.
Okay. So
15.
I said earlier that there's two issues here. One, are we violating RCW? And two, are we just violating common sense in our fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers? Whether you look at a $46.7 million price tag or a $53 million price tag, we are still spending way over the construction cost per square foot than any other comparable product out there. So at $46.7 million, I think it comes out to $920 a square foot. At $53 million, it's over $1,000 a square foot. That's still way more than a comparable product out there. The range that was quoted tonight was $150 to $300 per square foot. So however you roll in public amenities and the laundry list of things that are a part of this project, that still doesn't get to triple the construction costs. So that is a concern of its own. And that tripled construction cost is what leads to that lease rate. The lease rate that we pay. And we did hire Foster Pepper, who is a respected bond counsel. The question was asked, how is it that this RCW is met? And Mr. Spitzer's response in an email was, various jurisdictions that build facilities under the statute take different approaches to the RCW. Sometimes a city officer will simply sign a certificate to the effect that the annual rental rate will not be higher than prevailing rates. So essentially, a city officer can just say, because I said so. And we didn't get a city officer to say that. We paid Public-Private Development Solutions to write a 2-page memo, which included a hypothetical calculation that arrived at this higher rental rate, this prevailing rate of $76, which isn't rooted in reality. And I think the point that Councilmember Rayum is making is that Redmond
going through an identical process, building a city hall through a 6320 approach, went through a much more rigorous analysis to defend their rental rate, to defend themselves against, or to show that they had met the intent of RCW. And I don't think we've done that. And that's why I'm supporting this motion.
Thanks. I just got a note from the back that in 15 minutes our time on the tape will run out. So if the remaining three can take that in consideration and allow us to take this vote. Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Spivey.
Thank you. The one of the things I'm troubled with in all this discussion is the comment of how we were comparing to other projects. Well, the only thing that makes it an apples to apples comparison is if you look at only the shell, building the building, not the parking garage, because none of the others have parking garages. Not the public space. You have to look at what is the building cost, because that's the only apples to apples comparison. After that, we're on our own for those others. Surface parking in Redmond is a fraction of the cost of the sub-level parking that we're doing. So you have to look at just the building by building comparison, which was provided to us, and we fell in the middle of those costs between, I believe it was Redmond and Kenmore and Shoreline. There were multiple jurisdictions that we looked at. We fell right in the middle of those costs. And so I don't like the misuse of numbers to bolster the case. Let's look at the true cost of the building and see, are we building the building for the square footage, which I'm confident we are, that is in the market value, and not factor in the sub-level parking, because those are, $10,000, $20,000 a piece as opposed to $3,000 for surface. That's my 2 bits.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Evans.
The gentleman who spoke earlier tonight, Judd, something, I think he was a real estate appraiser or something, made reference to something that this clearly smells like a mortgage or something, if I remember what he was saying. Well, and it is, isn't it? I mean, aren't we essentially saying, okay, we're going to pay for this building through a lease or rent or monthly rent, whatever you want to call it, and at the end of 31 years or 30 years, we're going to own that building. So I guess is it wrong? Is this not a mortgage? It is a mortgage, isn't it?
Somewhat, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
More so than a rental agreement, is what the comparison has been.
Right. So at least from that standpoint, we're paying a lot of money, but we're going to own something at the end of this period that's going to be I'm guessing a 75-year-old building, not a 25-year-old building, as was alluded to earlier. So, and I think Councilmember Ream initially concern was he was questioning, and correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, I think there was a question about whether or not Hugh Spitzer was qualified or giving us the right information or something. I think you got a response back that you said, okay, I agree with, I understand now what Mr. Spitzer is saying. So I think your issue, if I understand it, and the other, is that it comes down to the $66 square foot number is too high compared to what other ones have done. I don't know if you want to.
Can I just clarify real quick? So I never questioned Hugh Spitzer's qualifications or Foster Pepper's qualifications. I initially asked to have information given to us about how we met that RCW with this memo, and he responded, and he said, yeah, that met the requirement. Actually, you could even do less. And so that's why, that's a moot point in my mind. It's more about our responsibility to make good financial decisions.
Yeah. Well, and I recall in our discussions that we had that you felt better after you received that initial memorandum, and for whatever reason, why you questioned it before, but you felt better after that memorandum. So I have actually worked with Foster Pepper Scheffelman through my whole career, financing facilities and things, and so I have the utmost respect for them. So I just don't think our bonding attorney is going to put us in a position that is illegal or whatever the case. So I'm not concerned from that standpoint that there's any legal basis. I think we're safe there. I don't know if that's what you came to that conclusion or not either. So the issue really comes back to this lease amount. And to me, it's a matter of comparing. What are we comparing here? We went into this project. We went to the 6320 process because we got a guaranteed maximum price from a contractor to build this building. We even challenged that contractor midway through the process saying, wait a minute, your numbers aren't good enough. You better sharpen your pencil a little bit and see what you can do better. They came back and they lowered that number. So, yes, it is an expensive facility. It's going to last a long time. It's different than building a spec building, so to say, I guess, a spec house. So I appreciate the concerns that have been shared, but until I've heard that legally we're on the wrong ground or financially that this is a bad investment, or I just haven't seen that confirmation yet. So I support the process as we're moving forward. And maybe it will come out in the bond process when we go to sell the bonds. Some investor may look at this and say, whoa, wait a minute. They're paying a lot of money for that building. It's not right. So those bonds something must be wrong with them. So anyway, I support how we're moving.
Great. Thank you, Councilmember Evans. Councilmember Agnew.
This has been a long process. This has been years and years and years. I think we have probably some of the finest legal counsel that we can get our hands on. I think Vulcan is probably one of the most reputable construction companies that we can find. I haven't heard anything tonight that we haven't heard before. And I, with that being said, can't really change my mind. I think we're doing the right thing for the citizens. I think we're trying to be as fiscally responsible as we possibly can. I think this is a very important building when it comes to the revitalization of downtown Bothell. I think it'll help in our economic development and our economic growth. So I can't support this issue.
Good. So everybody's had an opportunity to speak. I think this is the opportunity to go to a vote. So if everybody could place their vote, a vote in support would be to rescind the vote that we had privately taken on City Hall. A vote no is to maintain our direction. Clerk can display. Fails 5-2 with Councilmembers Sandberg and Rayum in the affirmative. So that ends that issue. Do we have any executive sessions this evening?
No, Mayor.
City manager reports?
No.
No further comments? Great, thank you. We're adjourned.
Right. That's why we tell them to focus on the shell and core, not the site costs.